Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 1271 of the War News stream. And we got in some very big news today that Iran suffered major explosions amid new war threats. Also, Russia has begun fuel shutoffs amid refinery attacks, and Ukraine strikes targets near Moscow yet again. And we got very big news, and it is the Sunday night fundraiser stream, and it's a very big night of news, and it's good to see you all once again.
And, of course, we're going to be covering the past 24 hours of news from around the world, as we have been able to hear of significant explosions that have been breaking out around the entirety of the Tehran city area, as the Iranian government is starting to state that war is imminent with the Israelis and the United States of America, and is only a matter of time from now. This is coming as the Israelis are continuing an air campaign against the Yemeni Houthis within western Yemen, and have also continued to make claims of further actions against the Hamas forces inside of the Gaza Strip, which the Chief of Staff has finally given its approval to in the midst of the ongoing campaign. We have also been able to hear at the exact same time that there are significant developments inside the Russian Federation, finally showing the soon-to-stated or upcoming fuel shortages have finally arrived, as we are starting to hear that multiple areas inside of occupied territories of the Russian Federation and some southern regions of the Russian Federation are undergoing fuel shortages at this very moment, with fuel no longer available to citizens if they have the money to buy it. Instead, they have to be able to get coupons from the government to be able to requisition fuel for specific governmental purposes, meaning that fuel shortages are beginning inside the Russian Federation due to the Ukrainian drone attacks on Russian refining infrastructure that has been going on for several years. The strategic fuel reserves have finally run out. This is also coming at the exact same time on the heels of the upcoming U.S.-Ukrainian meeting that'll be occurring here on this upcoming Monday, which is tomorrow, in between the President of the United States and the President president of Ukraine, as well as apparently the entirety of everyone in the European Union and the European part of NATO. They will be discussing the future of the situation with the Russian Federation, and we have been able to hear some fairly interesting developments in that regard, and also some statements from Emmanuel Macron and some significant leaders inside of the Republic of Poland about the current situation. Zelensky is already inbound to the United States at this time over the North Atlantic in an undisclosed location, and will be arriving at Joint Base Andrews most likely within several hours from now. We have also been able to hear that the People's Republic of China has been conducting significant preparations for their upcoming military parade, which will be conducted soon, and we've also been able to hear that around the area of the Taiwan Strait, the People's Republic of China has also been conducting significant air defense exercises and activities around that area to be able to prepare for their military preparedness or readiness in the advent of war or counterattacks by other forces. We've also been able to hear other breaking news that the state of Ukraine, as of today, has unveiled the new Flamingo cruise missile. This missile is purported to have the range of around 3,000 kilometers and carry a 1,000-pound warhead, a fairly significant cruise missile by all metrics, and it does appear that they are actually producing these in a factory assembly line, suggesting that they will be able to produce these and field these in incredibly large numbers as the war continues to progress. We've also been able to hear of other significant news around the Ukrainian front lines, as the Ukrainians have continued to inflict significant casualties onto the Russian Federation's armed forces, and we have a large amount of additional news beyond that to cover tonight. And on top of that all, it is the Sunday night fundraiser, and tonight's fundraiser is being run for Nova Ukraine, an amazing nonprofit that has been helping out in Ukraine since well before the beginning of the war and continues to help out with helping to supply and house Ukrainian families who are refugees from the war, and also helping to provide soldiers of the Ukrainian armed forces a future for once the war is over and they get out of the armed forces. It is an absolutely amazing nonprofit, and we hope that y'all do all support it tonight. But we are going to be getting into every single detail and bit of news that we have over the course of the past 24 hours, and that's going to be moving us first and foremost down into the area of the Islamic Republic of Iran, as we have been able to hear that within this area it does appear that the Islamic Republic of Iran is eyeballing a future war in the midst of what can only be described as a major attack in a more covert form against the Islamic Republic of Iran's capital over the course of today. Just to quickly bring y'all in or cue y'all into what's been happening inside of the area around the city of Tehran, there have been explosions in quite literally almost every quarter of the city, and significant ones at that. Starting off, we were able to hear that the Shahran oil depot has exploded once again and was on fire today. To quickly show y'all where this depot is, it's actually within the northern area of the city, and you can actually see the fuel storage tanks right about here. This is the Shahran fuel facility, which was hit prior by the Israelis in the 12-day war, which destroyed several of the fuel tanks that we were seeing at this facility, but from what we're understanding, some sort of an additional explosion occurred today, which resulted in a significant fire at the Shahran oil depot in the northern area of Tehran, which we can see in this clip right here.
26 شهریور انبار نفت شهران.
That's seen in that clip, but still showing us a larger fire that had occurred at least within that area. Outside of that, we also were able to hear of another massive fire breaking out in Tehran, apparently within the western area of the city, somewhere near to the area of the small Golistan Lake. We do not know a lot about this specific fire, but we can see that it was a larger smoke plume that was billowing from this area, and based off of all geolocation evidence and information that we were able to get before the stream, it does appear that this fire is happening within the area of the Golistan Lake, as it appears to be originating from a flatter area, and if this was the same Shahran oil depot fire that we were seeing earlier, and the camera was faced towards that fire, that specific facility is actually built onto the side of a mountain ridge, and the mountain would be visible. In this picture, it does not appear that there are any mountain ridges visible, even through the haze, and for this reason, it does line up with the geolocation of the Golistan Lake area where this fire originated from. We don't have a lot of details, at least at the moment, about this fire or what actually is on fire within this area, but this is two independent explosions and fires that have occurred within the northern and western areas of the city of Tehran, at least at that point of the day by the time this picture was taken. We can tell, however, that regardless of what is on fire, and we do not know the exact details of it, it is certainly a petroleum-based fire. as the smoke is thick black. If it was a munitions fire, it would be a thick white smoke. This is a thick black smoke, suggesting some form of a structure fire or some sort of a fuel storage fire. Outside of that, we also were able to hear of a third major explosion that happened all the way on the other side of the city within the Ray area of the Tehran province, or generally the Tehran city area just south of District 16. This fire was incredibly significant and was burning wildly when video and picture evidence was taken of it earlier in the day. And we can actually see that fire right here as well.
That's a huge fire right there. That is massive. You know what's really bad about this, though, is the Iranians don't have water to put this out because they're having a huge water crisis. So they don't even have water to drink. So they definitely don't have water to put fires out. So, you know, honestly, I don't know what they're going to do here. What they're going to use, bottled water to put it out? Because they don't really have bottled water either at this point.
Man, firefighting brought to you by Nestle. And that will be an interesting future for the Islamic Republic of Iran. But we do not know how they're going to put out these fires. As a matter of fact, fires of this size and scale, burning this violently, are pretty much uncontrolled fires, at least at that point. So we would generally assume that there really isn't an effective way for them to put out these fires, and they're just going to burn until they burn themselves out for the greater part of it. But we also were able to get a second clip from the area, also showing the fire from another angle, which we could see in this clip right here.
I like how they have a whole pool of spectators just staring at it the whole time on mopeds.
Yeah, they just have a whole bunch of people. They are all interested greatly by fire. But nevertheless, it does appear that the Islamic Republic of Iran's capital came under some sort of a significant covert attack today, because we do want to make it quite clear that there was absolutely no proof of any airstrikes being conducted by the United States or the Israelis against the capital city of Tehran today, and for that reason, this means that all of these fires and explosions, which occurred within hours of each other inside of Tehran, all had some sort of a covert beginning to them. They were started on the ground from some sort of ground operators that started these fires or explosions, which then resulted in the significant fires. With that in mind, this is an incredibly odd situation. We always hear of explosions and damage being conducted to the Islamic Republic of Iran throughout the entirety of the country on a slow-burning basis, usually about 1 or 2 things being blown up per day in multiple different areas of the country. We have never heard, since the end of the 12-day war that is, of 3 major fires, 2 of them at major petroleum facilities, breaking out within Tehran literally within hours of each other. This is the largest density of fires or incidents that have broken out inside of the city of Tehran since the end of the 12-day war and the conclusion of Operation Midnight Hammer that has been seen so far. And there's actually a lot to say that this is some sort of a preparatory action by an intelligence agency like Mossad for future military actions against the Islamic Republic of Iran, as we are starting to hear that the Islamic Republic of Iran's government has started to make it incredibly clear that they are not in a ceasefire and may actually be eyeballing the beginning or continuation of a conflict with Israel on their own. As a senior advisor to Iran's supreme leader stated, and I quote, "We are not in a ceasefire with Israel. Another war is expected." We've also been able to hear at the same time that there was heavy cargo plane traffic from the Russian Federation landing in Iranian airports today, possibly offloading equipment and cargo, which is also suggesting the Russian Federation may be attempting to support or arm the Islamic Republic of Iran for the upcoming conflict. We are also able to hear at the exact same time that there were significant embassy shutdowns throughout the entirety of the Islamic Republic of Iran, as we were able to hear of the public closures of the Swiss, German, and British embassies inside of Tehran, which is incredibly rare. And the only other time that we've seen the closure of embassies was when the 12-day war was just about to begin. This means that it's highly likely that these embassy closures are coming on really the headwind or the strong winds of an upcoming war, and a large amount of these governments have most likely started to tell their embassy staff within this country to shut down their operations, pack everyone up, and fly them back to their home countries to sit out the war inside of their home countries, and once the conflict is over, return and then reopen the embassies once that time window is generally available. But we also have been able to hear that a lot of people are weighing in on the major actions that we've already been hearing about in Tehran today, with explosions rocking large parts of the city, and not only that, the Islamic Republic of Iran making incredibly clear they believe that another war is imminent, and they may actually be the ones to start it, and we're already seeing that a lot of foreign nations such as the United Kingdom, Germany, and Switzerland are already beginning to act on that information and have already closed their embassies, and their embassy staff has already fled the country for the larger part. But Matthew, what are people thinking about that, and what are you thinking about that as well?
All right, so today in Tehran, the Iranian capital, we saw at least 3 massive explosions break out across the city, which is obviously very unusual for those all to be breaking out at the exact same time, and they were all at similar facilities. It was oil and fuel depots around the Iranian capital. So it seems to me like a concerted military effort, most likely by Israel, since that's the main adversary of Iran, that is most likely going in on the ground covertly and taking out these depots one by one. But of course, we don't have the concrete evidence to back that claim up just yet, but that's the most likely answer in my opinion. So what is the thoughts of the audience? So 65% said it's Israeli softening operations, while 19% said it could be Iranian rebels acting against their own government, and 8% said it's probably just accidents and bad timing. And this would be some super bad timing if it was a real accident. I really don't think this is an accident. This seems to be a very concerted effort. So I'm definitely with the 65%. It seems like Israel is softening up the Iranians yet again, and the one thing you'd want to soften up if you were going right back into a war with Iran would be their fuel supply, and that's exactly what blew up today in the Iranian capital. So to me, it seems pretty straightforward. This is the calm before the storm, essentially, before a major war kicks back off between those two countries. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would generally have to say that I'm with the 65% as well. We already have known and have been able to hear from multiple sources that Mossad ground operatives have been conducting sabotage operations throughout the Islamic Republic of Iran, and these actions inside of Tehran today appear to be incredibly similar, if not completely identical to the sorts of actions and key targets that have been attacked and destroyed over prior months by Mossad operatives who were on the ground inside of the Islamic Republic of Iran. For that reason, and also considering that the Islamic Republic of Iran has made it incredibly clear that they're still working on an attempt to create and field a nuclear weapon, it is obvious that the Israelis and the Iranians know that a war is coming, because the state of Israel will want to ensure that the Islamic Republic of Iran is truly denuclearized, along with the United States of America, and the Islamic Republic of Iran will fight until the very last minute to be able to try and develop and field that nuclear weapon that they've been working on for over a decade, at least at this point. With all that coming around, both sides are going to be coming to a head. The Iranians will not stop their nuclear development, and Israel and the United States will not stop their demands to stop the Iranians from becoming a nuclear-armed power. So pretty much, it's guaranteed that this war will be kicking off again, and we will most likely see that this time around, the Islamic Republic of Iran will hopefully be denuclearized completely here in the upcoming months. But moving on from that, we also were able to hear other significant news inside the Islamic Republic of Iran that is showing that they are preparing for future warlike actions with the state of Israel and the United States of America, as we have also been able to hear that, as previously stated, Iran acquired China's HQ-9B long-range surface-to-air missile systems, later confirmed by both Iranian and Israeli sources. Apparently, we have heard that Tehran has submitted a major arms procurement proposal to China, seeking local production of the HQ-9B and HQ-16 systems, a long-range anti-ship missiles, and potentially the J-10C multi-role fighter. Apparently, we've heard that China has not approved anything, but it does appear that the Islamic Republic of Iran is attempting to modernize its military capabilities, most importantly in air superiority and air denial and air defense. This is the most important part of a conflict that could arise between the Islamic Republic of Iran and the United States of America and Israel, is air defense systems. And the People's Republic of China generally is the largest non-American producer of air defense systems in the world, with the HQ-9B being one of the most prolific air defense systems in most non-Western countries in the world at this point. The HQ-9B and the HQ-16 all operate somewhat similarly to their Russian counterparts. You can actually see the HQ-16 right here, which is incredibly analogous to that of a Pantsir S-1 air defense system, but these two systems combined can generally create an air denial perimeter, with the HQ-16 providing closer in air defense around the distance of 20 miles or so, while the larger HQ-9 provides air denial over a larger area, somewhere around 100 to 110 miles, and is capable of engaging and possibly destroying enemy fighter aircraft within that distance or up to that distance. This is an incredibly...
It sure is concerning to see. Like, China is providing a lot of air defense to Iran. We've also heard reports as well of the Russians flying in tons of equipment, apparently from mainland Russia down to Iran today. It's very concerning to see all this, because it seems like, even though these countries are saying they're trying to vie for peace, they're also trying to create proxy war situations in the Middle East. It's really quite horrifying to see that, actually, because it looks like Iran is getting rearmed, and they're getting rearmed enough to have another big go at Israel very soon.
It actually is quite concerning, and we do know that the People's Republic of China is most likely going to be apt to provide these sorts of weapon systems, because not only does it help to bolster and strengthen the Chinese defense industry and allow them to work with a larger amount of reserve capital from their own wallets as somewhat semi-private companies or quasi-private companies for further research and development, but it also allows for them to ensure that the enemies of the West are able to have a bit better chance of trying to survive an onslaught from Western nations like the United States of America, the State of Israel, or the entirety of NATO. For that reason, we generally would believe that the People's Republic of China is going to be providing these systems at some point in the future in larger numbers, and may actually be willing to help license produce these weapon systems inside of the Islamic Republic of Iran, with Iran paying royalties to China for each weapon system produced. But these sorts of systems are something that could help out the Islamic Republic of Iran, but I also want to make it a little bit clear that the Iranian army already had a lot of similar equipment, or what we could call analogous equipment, pretty much operating in a similar vein before the conflict even broke out in the 12-day war. And to quickly show you all this is something that I think is incredibly important to point out, is that this is not really going to be some saving grace of the Islamic Republic. It's most likely going to be a way for them to bolster their abilities on paper, but not in actual performance. And for that, we have to go find their air defense and show that off to y'all really quickly, because it's always incredibly important to talk about air defense. Air defense is the most important sort of a system that an armed force can operate in the modern day and age, because if you do not control the skies over your country and you do not have a large enough air force to do so, then you generally have lost a war already, at least for the larger part. They do have some systems like the Arman, which have a 180-kilometer range. They also have the Bavar 13, I believe this is, or the 373, which has a range of 230 kilometers, at least advertised. They also have some HQ-9Bs, although these arrived after the end of the 12-day war from what we were able to hear, but most importantly, they have the S-300 PMU. And the S-300 is quite literally the HQ-9. It's just the Russian version of the HQ-9. As a matter of fact, it's actually the other way around. The HQ-9 is the Chinese version of the S-300. The HQ-9 was actually largely reverse engineered or license produced off of the S-300 and S-400 missile system. This means that the Islamic Republic of Iran already had this air interdiction or air defensibility before the beginning of the 12-day war and Operation Midnight Hammer, and throughout the entirety of that war, we never saw any heavy caliber air defense systems like an S-300 in operation. This is either suggesting that the Islamic Republic of Iran did not have adequate training to be able to operate these systems, or that these systems were not maintained adequately enough throughout their service life in Iran to be able to be operational when they were called upon at their moment of need. Either way, it doesn't paint a good picture of the Islamic Republic of Iran's air defense capabilities, and the additional provision of HQ-9s and HQ-16s, while on paper improving their air defense abilities, may only be improving it on paper alone and not providing them any additional air defense advantage in any sort of a larger grand warfare scenario. Not only that, we do understand that if the State of Israel was to go to war with the Islamic Republic of Iran, the F-35I Adir can operate, at least in principle, as pretty much a suppression of enemy air defense aircraft, which is a SEAD aircraft. The F-35s can carry AGM-88 harms, from what I would generally understand, and considering that the aircraft are stealth, and that the radar systems of the HQ-9 and the HQ-16 would not be able to detect an F-35 until it was right on top of the air defense system, the F-35 could actually close in on enough range while the radar systems are still online and active to be able to target and specifically destroy these air defense systems and open up the skies for further attacks either by the Israelis or the United States of America. That's actually something that we saw last time in the last conflict, is that the State of Israel went out of its way in the 12-day war with its F-35I Adirs to target and destroy any and all locatable Iranian air defense systems that were stationary, to open up the skies for further attacks and to increase the efficiency and the ability for Israel to reach farther into Iran and attack and destroy specific military targets and top officials. So that most likely will not be giving them a big saving grace, but it would be improving their situation marginally by maybe a few percentage points. We also were able to hear that apparently there is now a GPS disruption occurring across the entirety of Tehran, which is an incredibly interesting thing to hear about, once again showing that there's some sort of electromagnetic interference happening within the area. And we also were able to hear that once again the Iranian government or Yaha Rahim Safavi, the top military advisor to Khamenei, did say that another war is coming. And once again, to state more quotes from this top advisor, we are not in a ceasefire right now. We are in a phase of war. No protocol, regulation, or agreement has been written between us and the U.S. or Israel. It is possible another war will break out. After that war, there won't be another. And it is once
Oh
again...
yeah, right. Iran's just tough, you know. Once they do another war, it's gonna be like that's gonna be the war that ends all wars. They may have the thirstiest soldiers in the world, kind of like North Korea has the hungriest soldiers in the world, but Iran's gonna finish it this time, folks. Believe them.
Man, I gotta tell you, if Iran and North Korea teamed up together, they'd be the army of the starving and the thirsty. Not really a great combination. But nevertheless, it does appear that a lot of people have been talking about the Iran war and the possibility of another conflict looming. And once again, to lay out the scene for all of y'all right now on the simple level of what actually are the moving mechanisms at play, the Islamic Republic of Iran is working towards fielding nuclear weapons. And they are hell-bent on doing that, whether people want them to or not. The United States and Israel are hell-bent on stopping the Iranians from developing and fielding nuclear weapons, and will go to all measures necessary at this point to be able to try and stop them from doing such a thing. Now, with all of that in mind, considering the two sides, you pretty much have an unstoppable force and an immovable object meeting together at a head. What are people thinking about this, Matthew? Do they think that war is going to be coming around again, or do they think that this is more so nothing but simple hype, and we'll just let the Iranians develop a nuclear weapon and sit by and watch?
All right, so we are hearing clearly from the Iranian generals and also the Iranian government that they are saying that war is not over between them and Israel, and they are raring to go for another round at Israel. And the question is, has Iran properly been rearmed by their allies, Russia and China, to be able to have another proper go at Israel, or are they still behind the gun, basically, when it comes to actually rearming themselves enough to be able to fight? So we know they're having a water crisis. Their soldiers may not have anything to drink, but apparently they do have some weapons in their arsenals behind the scenes. But also, by the way, the U.S. president is warning on a Fox News interview that he believes that there are some loose ends with Iran, and that war may indeed fire right back up very, very soon. So it seems like the entire stage is being set for a brand new major conflict to basically break out at any point at this point. So what are your thoughts about that? 60% said war is likely and very imminent, while 25% said war is possible but not likely, and 9% said I don't think anything will happen. And I'm in the camp of the 60%. I would say war seems to be very likely and also imminent, and that's not really a shock because, of course, they weren't really finished last time. The last time it kind of came to a brief pause, but that's mainly because Iran ran out of air defense. Also, their entire airspace got controlled by Israel, and basically they got their asses whooped. So they had to stop, but now that they've had a chance to regroup and rearm, that's the dangerous point. Now they could be back to it again, and they could launch a pretty large attack on Israel and be right back at square zero that we saw last time. So we could be in for another 12-day war, or maybe something even bigger than that. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would generally have to say that, in my opinion, I do believe that war is imminent with the Islamic Republic of Iran. Once again, like I was laying out just before we got to the poll itself, the Islamic Republic of Iran is going to create a nuclear weapon whether we want them to or not. And we are going to stop them from creating a nuclear weapon whether they want us to stop them or not. That means that both sides are on a collision course to go back into a conflict again, because we are not going to allow them to have a nuclear weapon, and Iran is going to make themselves a nuclear weapon at all costs. They're going to keep going until they cannot. So that means that there is going to be another war coming down the pipe. And I do want to explain, once again to many, that a war with the Islamic Republic of Iran is probably the most justifiable conflict that we have in the modern age right now at this point. If any other conflict could be said that it's not our problem, it's not our fight, this certainly is not the one. The Iranians are creating a nuclear weapon. A nuclear weapon at the same time as they're developing an intercontinental ballistic missile. So they are developing the two main things, the two key most important things that they would need to have to be able to fire that nuclear weapon at the United States and vaporize the viewers themselves that are watching right now here in America in a nuclear hellfire. That is the actual threat that the Iranians are imminently posing to the United States of America if we do not stop them now. The Iranian government has made it clear time and time again over the past few months since the end of the 12-Day War and Operation Midnight Hammer that they are working towards a nuclear weapon. They have been working towards a nuclear weapon, and nothing will stop them from working towards and fielding a nuclear weapon. Not to fearmonger, but that is something that is working worth being fearful of. They are creating a nuclear weapon. They have openly said it, they have admitted it at this point, and they are also flagrantly in violation of the non-proliferation treaties that the United States of America and every nuclear power is a signing member of. That means that if we do not stop them now, this incredibly unstable government, which is facing a near-apocalyptic crisis within the next year, is going to be nuclear armed, and will be able to wield that nuclear weapon as a looming threat to all of its regional allies on its border across the Persian Gulf and everywhere else around the world, including the United States of America, whenever something doesn't go their way. The Iranians are probably more dangerous, to be entirely honest with y'all, than the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, or North Korea as a lot of people would call it, because the Islamic Republic of Iran is not as stable a government as the Kim regime. The Kim regime, because of their Songbun social system and the Songun, have been able to ensure that they will remain in power for an incredibly long period of time. It's already clear that the Islamic Republic of Iran has a great deal of public dissent against the government, and given that there is an apocalyptic scenario of a complete lack or deprivation of water coming up inside of Iran, that could lead the public to be incredibly violent, hostile, and lead to complete collapse of social order, and also to the complete collapse of the central government as well. With that in mind, they could end up trying to field that nuclear weapon against someone within the region to try and take the attention off of the desperate internal domestic situation, or they may end up fielding that nuclear weapon against their own people. It's not entirely clear what would end up happening at that point, but whichever one occurs, that is an insanely terrible scenario. That is the worst scenario that could be imaginable at this point, is if they get a nuclear weapon. It's imperative.
Well, also seeing the fact that China and Russia are so willing to rearm Iran, that was one thing I was wondering about. I was thinking last time, because last time Iran ran their entire stocks of armaments out. They ran pretty much everything out. They were out of missiles, they were out of interceptors, they were out of ammunition. They ran out of pretty much everything inside of Iran, and their whole stockpile was run down pretty much flat. But I was wondering, is Russia and China, with Russia already being in the midst of their own war over there with Ukraine, and also China preparing for a war with Taiwan and potentially the West, are those two countries going to pool their resources together and give them to Iran so that way they can start a new conflict with Israel? And it turns out that they actually have. It seems like that is likely the case. And basically, until the Iranian regime is changed inside of Iran right now, this is going to keep happening over and over. It's going to be like Groundhog Day until that regime is removed from power inside of Iran, which is really disturbing because now we're basically left with either two options here. We can either keep doing this every 6 months and keep fighting the Iranians and hope that Israel can hold their ground, or number two, the West can get involved and try to get rid of this very terrible regime, which is hell-bent on causing disasters in the region. So, I mean, to me, it seems like the answer is getting pretty clear. We're sort of backed into a corner at this point, and unless we want to keep letting Israel go through hell and torment every 6 months, we're going to have to do something, at least to some respect.
And outside of the fact of helping out the Israelis, which is more so a secondary objective of the United States than a primary objective, the primary objective is that we need to stop the Iranians from threatening our sphere of influence in the Middle East and also the United States of America directly, which will happen if they get a nuclear weapon. And there's nothing that we can do to stop them, because to make this a little bit clear, once they get a nuclear weapon, there's no going back. There's no way to reverse that. There's no way to get it from them. That's wishful thinking. Because here's what would happen if we tried to do such a thing. If we tried to go to war with Iran and they have a nuclear weapon, they are going to load a nuclear warhead onto a Fata-1 hypersonic missile, which right now there really isn't a 100% successful interception rate on hypersonics. We can intercept them, but the interception rate is somewhere around 50% to 60%, meaning that there is a half and half chance that thing could make it through an air defense perimeter. They could fire that thing at Israel, or they could fire that thing at Saudi Arabia, and they just ended up killing millions of people. That is the best case scenario. The worst case scenario is that they make an ICBM and they fire that thing right at the United States of America, at a major city like New York City or somewhere else, and the GMD, which is the only ICBM defense system we have in the United States, is incapable of successfully intercepting that missile or its warheads, and one of those nuclear warheads actually airbursts directly over downtown Manhattan. That would be one of the worst situations that we could see at that point, or any other major city in the United States for that matter. With that in mind, that's why it's incredibly important that we go in there and deal with them, because it's not necessarily about the sake of the Israelis, to be entirely honest with you all, from an American thing perspective. From an Israeli perspective, it's about their own national security. From an American perspective, as the United States of America, it's also about our national security as well. And the Israelis and the United States can find common ground on that situation and work together for our common defense against the Iranian threat. But with that in mind, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least from what I could say at the moment about the situation. But if a war does happen again with the Islamic Republic of Iran, this is not a repeat of the 2003 invasion of Iraq, where there was some rumors they have weapons of mass destruction. The Iranians are openly saying they have them. So if there was ever a justifiable moment to operate offensively against a country, this is the moment right now for our own self-preservation. But nevertheless, we have been able to hear that the fundraiser has gotten up to a whopping $1,024.
Hey! Let's go. Look at that. It's going strong right there. I love to see it.
And we are getting incredibly close to the halfway point. We're almost to 1,250. And of course, folks, I hope that y'all do support tonight. The fundraiser is for Nova Ukraine, and it is an absolutely amazing fundraiser. If y'all can support, please do, because each and every bit of support that y'all give to that fundraiser is helping out folks in Ukraine through the amazing Nova Ukraine nonprofit, which has been helping out in Ukraine throughout the entirety of the war. And the folks in Ukraine who get that support from Nova Ukraine are massively appreciative, not just of Nova Ukraine, but the entirety of the Lee Spring Army, who's been so generous and thankful in supporting the state of Ukraine and supporting American and Western interests around the globe. And so with that, I hope that does address that incredibly well. Please make sure to support the fundraiser, folks. We would love to hit the goal tonight. And the Lee Spring Army has never missed a fundraiser goal in the entirety of its history. But with that, it is time for us to move on down into a little tidbit of extra news outside of Iran, because it does appear that the Israelis are continuing their air campaigns against the Houthi Yemeni-controlled city of Sana'a, as we were able to see more significant fires breaking out today after Israeli airstrikes are continuing to pummel the city.
Isn't it crazy that Israel actually used their Navy to hit these targets down here? I heard that they used their Navy from 2,000 kilometers away to strike Yemen, which is kind of unusual based on what I've heard.
Yeah, it is pretty unusual, pretty interesting, and that probably would have been one of the larger surface ships that the Israelis have, because their navy is not massively large. I believe that one of the largest ships they have is a destroyer-sized vessel, but let me go look at the Israeli navy ships really quickly, because it probably would have been one of the larger ones. They don't have a great deal of ships. It would probably be a SAR-6 class corvette.
Interesting. That's not too bad of a looking ship. I mean, Israel's not known for their navy per se, but I mean, it's pretty decent looking.
And apparently it's loosely based on the German Braunschweig class corvettes, which you can see right here. And I would say that's not really loosely based. That's almost like a one-to-one copy of it. Like, if you look at that, very similar to the Braunschweig class. But beyond that, we are going to be moving on from that little bit of interesting development there. But we can see the fires continuing to burn inside of Sana'a. And once again, most of this damage was actually caused from airstrikes. Well, not really airstrikes, but more so cruise missile strikes by the Israeli Navy specifically.
I guess you could say it's hotter than a sauna in the city at this point. They've got a very good heat source right in the middle of it.
Man, respect.
That screaming I'm hearing out in the distance. Did you hear that? Back the video up just a little bit.
Let's see. It just sounds like some kids.
Okay.
Nothing.
Yeah,
nothing
I think it might have been some kids maybe. It sounded at first like someone screaming, but I guess it was just a kid out there playing. You know.
It sounds like it, but the fire is huge. We do not know exactly what was hit here. This is not the power plant that was hit last night, although we were able to get satellite photography of the power plant today and show that it has been completely destroyed. Whatever is burning, however, it appears to be some sort of a liquid petroleum because of the thickness of the black smoke and also the massive rolling flames that are encompassing a wide area on the ground below. Outside of that, we also were able to see that the satellite photography did come out, showing that the Haziz power plant was pretty much completely destroyed last night in the airstrikes, which we saw on film yesterday. It does appear that the larger part of the power plant, or the boiling vessel, was actually destroyed, meaning that the power plant is no longer able to produce any form of electricity, at least until repairs are effected. And considering that the Yemeni Houthi-controlled territories are literally an unrecognized terrorist force, and there's really no way to to import anything into the region. And that power plant has been knocked out permanently until Western Yemen comes under legitimate Yemeni government control again at some point in the future. But nevertheless, it does appear that that situation is going to be deteriorating for the Houthis for quite some time still at this point. And we have also been able to hear at the exact same time inside of southern Syria, believe it or not, folks, the Syrian interim government and the Druze are back at it again, apparently.
Oh, damn. Oh, my God. Nobody will ever accuse these people right here in Syria of being ununique in their fighting. Like, whenever you hear a video coming out of Syria, you can recognize it immediately by hearing the catchphrase and also seeing insane amounts of flashes and gunfire in the middle of the night, like endlessly, indiscriminate. Like, I think they're the only like footage I've seen outside of some other conflicts in remote areas that just operates in such a chaotic environment like that.
I gotta be honest with y'all, and I also gotta agree with that as well, Matthew, that this region is, I don't really think Syria is ever going to be stable at this point, because it doesn't really appear that anyone can actually understand what would need to be done to make it stable. So now they're all back at it again down in that area. So we'll be waiting to see what comes out of it once more. But if anything, if anything is worth going off of the last time, nothing's going to come out of this. There will be a great deal of bloodshed, a great deal of heavy fighting. The Syrian interim government, of course, will be trying to genocide a large amount of Druze people within the area, and then they'll say, hey, relax, guy, and then they'll chill out for a little bit, and then it'll start up again. So it appears that bloodshed in Syria is just a really normal sort of a thing. I don't really think that's going to be changing anytime soon, much like bloodshed in Lebanon's not really going to be changing anytime soon either. Those two countries are pretty much just relegated to, like, pretty much being the Thunderdome or the Blood Bowl of the world. Like, if you ever wanted to be a war tourist somewhere, I think this is the only area of the world where that's actually a thriving tourism industry every single year, because there's literally no end of the fighting of any kind. There's going to be fighting in between tribal clans. There's going to be fighting in between the SDF and the SIG, the Druze and the SIG and Hezbollah and local gangs, the Lebanese government and Hezbollah, the Lebanese government and the local gangs, the families who end up getting into feuds and end up blasting each other. I mean, it's like literally this region has about 9,000 different people that can go to war with each other, and all 9,000 people 9,000 groups of people within this area all have a reason to go to war with the other 8,999 groups that they aren't a part of. So, and also, considering that apparently nobody in the foreign policy sphere understands that we eventually have to segregate these folks into specific semi-autonomous republics or just completely different regions and possibly balkanize the area, considering that nobody's also understanding that either, and that generally be probably the easiest way to stop the bloodshed, at least to some extent, this is going to keep going. But to also be entirely honest with y'all, I've been thinking about my prior claims and saying we ought to just create independent nations out of the Druze, the SDF, and the Alawite Arabs, and then I started thinking, wait a minute, that wouldn't really work either, because then what would happen is that the majority Sunni Arab population would say that the West came in, the wicked wayward ways of the West. We came in and we carved up Syria and took away their greatness, and they have to go on some sort of a not even a holy war, just a war for nationalist pride to be able to retake the Alawite Arab region, the Druze, and then also the Kurds, and bring them all back under control of a centralized government and genocide anyone who would disagree with them. So even then, that probably wouldn't stop a lot of the conflict. It would just make it more so legitimized that the conflicts would be illegal, more so than an internal domestic matter of the Syrian interim government. But outside,
the sad part is, I think, honestly, a lot of people were hopeful that maybe after Assad was gone out of Syria and taken out of power, that somehow things would slightly improve, at least somewhat. But unfortunately, I think, honestly, in my opinion, I think it actually might have been slightly better under Assad at this point. And that's not, obviously anything good, because it was bad under Assad. It was terrible under that regime. But it seems like this new regime here with Jelani is actually much worse, much more chaotic, and also a lot more degenerate acting toward the population as well. Just indiscriminate killings, a bunch of attacks down there on the Druze people in southern Syria. It's really honestly worse under this guy, actually. I didn't think it could get worse.
Yeah, it's absolutely crazy, honestly, how bad it's gotten. Because everyone did think that it was the worst under Assad, and it appeared to be true until we got what we wished for, which was the end of the Assad government. And this guy is literally worse. Like, I don't even know how that was possible, but this guy goes around quite truly like some sort of like Sinbad and his 40 thieves, just going around slaughtering people all over the country. I mean, it's not even anything that looks like it has some sort of semblance control to it. They literally mobilize people from places like Aleppo and send them down the highway to wherever anyone's protesting against the government and just slaughter the people. So it's an absolutely horrendous sort of a situation. And I would honestly have to say that the situation has not improved. It has not even remained the same. It's actually gotten worse. But outside of that, we have been able to hear that the Israeli government is continuing their actions with the attempted annexation of the Gaza Strip. We were able to hear earlier today that the State of Israel's chief of staff did finally approve the ground invasion plans and are starting to move forward with the offensive with their own approval. But at the same time, we've also been able to hear of mass protests inside of Tel Aviv, nearly 200,000 strong, against the possible annexation of the Strip. This actually has ended up becoming a somewhat divisive topic, at least even inside of Israel, as it appears that many are fans of the complete occupation of the Strip, while many others are not really necessarily major fans of the occupation of the Gaza Strip. But we can actually see the size of the protest here, and we can actually see that it quite truly is about 200,000 strong, stretching on well off into the distance and pretty much wrapping around every single city block. So generally showing that this has become one of the more decisive actions, or divisive actions more so, of this part of the century, at least inside the Middle East, as far as the State of Israel's war with the terrorist factions are concerned with Hamas and Hezbollah. But nevertheless, it does appear that a lot of people have been talking about the Israeli strikes on Houthi targets in the midst of this protest that is going on in Tel Aviv, and it appears that a lot of people have been talking about the Israeli statements that were also made that they are going to be conducting a naval and air blockade against the Yemeni Houthis until the foreseeable future, until eventually the Houthis capitulate. But Matthew, what are people thinking about that, and what are you thinking about that as well?
All right, so we did see that the Houthis got the wrath of Israel put on them last night. It looks like the Israelis launched a massive naval assault with missiles onto the area of Sana'a, which is the capital of Yemen, and they destroyed a power plant. And it turns out that in the power plant were actually some top Houthi leaders. So they happened to be hanging out there in the power plant. Who knows why, but they were there in the control room, according to the Israelis, and that's why they struck it. And we saw that massive explosion on camera a short while ago. So what are your thoughts about that situation? It looks like 45% said the Iranian proxies will get active after this new assault on Yemen, while 24% said the attacks will probably go unanswered by the proxies, and 23% said this will probably provoke an Iranian response directly. And I really doubt the Iranians are going to respond to this. They're getting prepared for a brand new war with Israel, and they're still preparing for it. So they're going to save their ammunition until that exchange. But I suspect these attacks right here probably will provoke a response from the other proxy forces. That's Hezbollah, Hamas, and also the Houthis themselves. It probably will provoke an equal response of some form or another. So I'm with the 45%. This probably will kick the hornet's nest and get them acting up once again. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that, at least in my opinion, I do think that I'd be with the 45%. I do believe that Iranian proxies are going to be getting a lot more active here in the near future. Also considering that a war with the Islamic Republic of Iran is inevitable at this point once again, and most likely will be happening before the end of this year. So with that in mind, I have a feeling that for multiple reasons, we're probably going to see that the Houthis, the Hamas, and Hezbollah forces that are left will be trying to conduct their own attacks against the State of Israel if they have the supply or manpower abilities to be able to do such a thing, which they might not really have. But beyond that, it is an incredibly interesting situation nonetheless. But moving on from that and on into some other major news that we've been able to hear, I want to move you all into this story out of order here for a moment, because this is probably one of the biggest stories that we have, at least in terms of the impact that it'll be causing inside of Russia. As many of y'all will know, we've been talking for years about Ukrainian attacks on oil refineries throughout the entirety of the Russian Federation. And we have been able to see that there has been a large amount of attacks just recently on Russian oil refineries, including the one in Volgograd, which, once again, to remind you all, just happened yesterday. You can actually see the clip of it right here. These sorts of fires and the damage that Ukrainian drone attacks are able to conduct on these refineries are quite damaging to Russia's fuel refining abilities, and generally at this moment in time, we understand that just around a quarter of Russian fuel refining capacity has been knocked out or destroyed within prior weeks from Ukrainian drone attacks, with the Russians racing to effect some form of repairs. This is something that for a while has been a more abstract principle, that eventually, with the Ukrainians striking these oil refineries, the Russians will start to run out of usable fuel products, and that fuel shortages will start to grip the country. Up until now, there's never been any proof to actually show that Russian strategic fuel reserves are truly running out, or that Russia is running at an extreme fuel deficit. And that was up until now. Today, as of right now, the Russians are officially entering crippling fuel shortages. As of today, with official proof to be able to show that. We were able to hear that inside of Crimea and the occupied territories, as well as some regions of southern Russia, fuel shortages are now beginning to grip the country. According to some Russian military bloggers, due to regular attacks on refineries, gasoline began to be sold with coupons in Crimea and Transbaikalia. Transbaikalia, there we go. In Crimea, 95th has disappeared from filling stations completely, or it is only given to enterprises with cards. The prices soared to 69.95 rubles per liter. To put this out there as well, I believe there's about 2 liters or 2.5 liters in a gallon. So this means that gas in Russia has now entered the ballpark of U.S. gas prices, meaning that a gallon will cost about $3.50 or so.
And that's terrible for them because they don't make the wages we do. So for them to be paying U.S. gas prices and U.S. dollars like forms of money, that's extremely unaffordable for the average Russian because they make I think it's like 4 or 5 times less than the average American.
It's absolutely unaffordable, and they do make less than 5 times the amount of an American, and the fuel is costing the same price, meaning that this is having a massive impact on the citizens of Russia. And not only that, not only is the fuel incredibly expensive if you can get it, but most people will not have access to gasoline at all. In Krasnokamensk and Borussia, notices were posted at the entrance to gas stations that gasoline is only available to organizations, meaning that at this point, gas is only being rationed at extremely high costs to the fuel to the businesses that are continuing to keep some sort of economic activity running. So at this point, fuel shortages have finally arrived, and if you do not believe me, we actually have video and picture evidence showing the fact that Russian gas stations are no longer providing fuel to the public. You can actually see right there, at least when it's kind of shimmying a little bit, that some of these gas types are showing no price, like 95, because it's quite literally not for sale. So it does appear that fuel shortages finally have arrived.
But you said goofball doing that U-turn right in the middle of the road right there? That was like peak Russian stupidity. Look at that. He's going to get run over.
Dude, that's like that 18-wheeler that did that U-turn down in Florida, I think it was.
Oh, that was terrible.
Yeah, that was terrible. But people have got to be a little bit smart about that kind of stuff. Like, doing a U-turn in the middle of a busy street is an idiotic move. And it looks like the Russians are pretty idiotic when it comes to road safety. But nevertheless, it does appear that the Russians are officially running out of oil. This is something not really running out of oil. In terms of crude, they actually have a lot of crude oil. The problem is they don't have gasoline or diesel or generally most refined fuel products. And I do have to explain the difference in that again, because this is something that a lot of people, including myself, didn't really know until I looked into it. Oil production does not equal usable fuel. Crude oil, which I'll show y'all right here. Crude oil. Let me see if I can show y'all a picture of it. Crude oil looks like that. It's literally a black tar-like substance. It pretty much is tar. Most people here in the South became incredibly familiar with what crude oil was during the BP oil spill, I believe, of 2009. And that stuff was incredibly gelatinous. As a matter of fact, there actually were what was called tar balls that would wash up onto the beach, and it was just a solid gunk of crude oil that had pretty much solidified into what was almost like a rubberish ball. But nevertheless, you cannot throw that in a car and burn it as gasoline. All crude oil has to be refined to some degree. Some crude oil isn't really refined much at all, like bunker C oil. That's pretty much about as straight up crude as crude gets in terms of usable fuel. But the refined kinds of fuel products that y'all use, like gasoline or diesel, those have to be refined to a significant degree. You can actually see here the different kinds of fractional distillations of crude oil and what it turns into. The highest degree, or at least the greatest degree of refining, actually turns into bitumen, which is used in roads and all sorts of other stuff. There is a load of different kinds of fuel that can be made, but some of the most common ones would be petroleum gas and gasoline. Those are the ones that most public transportation works off of, except for paraffin, which is used by aviation in aircraft and such things. And there are other types of fuel beyond that as well, like fuel oil, which is generally called bunker sea oil or something similar, that is generally used for maritime purposes and has caught a lot of flack recently because it is incredibly polluting. Like, the amount of emissions that type of fuel makes is actually pretty wild. But outside of that, it does appear that, at least at the moment right now, the Russians are running out of their ability to have a large amount of gasoline or petroleum gas available. That also means that the remainder of the fuel products are also going to be running short. But the fuel consumption of these different types of fuel products is, of course, dependent on the amount of consumption in Russia. And considering that gasoline and diesel are usually the highest consumed fuel types out of all of them, that generally means that those are going to be ones hit first. And those are also going to be the most impactful to the Russian economy. And, of course, it's finally happening as of today, and will most likely be compounding over the next several weeks and months to the point that where the entirety of the Russian Federation is under some sort of a fuel shortage regime or regimen to be able to try and conserve the remaining available fuel resources that they have left. But beyond that, I do understand that a lot of people are talking about that at the moment and weighing in with their comments and opinions on what is starting to turn into a Russian fuel crisis at the moment. And Matthew, what are people thinking about that, and what are you thinking about that as well?
All right, so many people are commenting on the fuel cutoffs in Crimea and also the gasoline shortage due to these refinery attacks. And what are your thoughts? 62% of the audience said this will soon be a Russia-wide issue and not isolated just to Crimea, while 21% said it will remain isolated to Crimea, and 9% said this is only a short-term issue and it'll be fixed and resolved very soon. And for the fact that they're cutting off gasoline to the people, I would say this is not going to be a short-term issue. This sounds like a very serious issue, and it's honestly the very first sign we've got, a very tangible sign that the refinery attacks are actually doing the job that Ukraine hoped they were going to do, because this is the first signs of them cutting off gas strictly due to refinery attacks. So I believe this issue is going to spread. It's probably going to be spreading very slowly. It probably won't be an immediate thing, but Crimea is ground zero of the gasoline shortage because it's harder to get gas there compared to mainland Russia. But I suspect it's going to start spreading throughout the other regions closer to the border of Ukraine and then out from there. So, Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that this is going to be Russian-wide here, most likely within a couple of weeks or a couple of months. If the availability of fuel is getting so low that they're having to ration it within occupied territories, that is going to spread to Russia incredibly quickly. Russian fuel consumption generally is seen within Western Russia. Crimea and the occupied territories do not make up a bulk of fuel consumption. If they have been running a fuel deficit in the strategic fuel reserves for that long that they have to ration it anywhere, this might start to impact the entirety of the Russian Federation within just several weeks or a couple of months at this point, generally considering that fuel resources are spread evenly amongst most of the Russian Federation. However, we actually do have some breaking news that's coming out at this moment. So Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so we do have some breaking news relating to Ukraine and Russia, and specifically tomorrow on Monday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, there's going to be a meeting at the White House that includes Zelensky, the U.S. president, and the European leaders all together in one place, which sounds like a recipe for something very interesting. But the big breaking news is we have heard that Zelensky has arrived in the United States as of right this second, and Zelensky confirms that in a statement. And also, we've gotten a very lengthy statement explaining Zelensky's position ahead of time, ahead of the meeting, before he even goes into it. I was not expecting to see this right now, but we do have the initial statement from Zelensky and also a statement from the U.S. president as well. And I can tell you right now, reading these two statements, we're about to read them off on the air. It looks like we're about to have a spicy situation tomorrow. It looks like the U.S. president and Zelensky are on completely separate pages, and tomorrow is going to be extremely interesting to watch. But Enforcer, would you like to walk us through Zelensky's statement and then the U.S. president's statement?
Yes, and we will be making sure to speak on that. And so, really quickly, here is the statement from the president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky. I have already arrived in Washington. Tomorrow, I am meeting with President Trump. Tomorrow, we are also speaking with European leaders. I am grateful to the president for the invitation. We all share a strong desire to end this war quickly and reliably, and peace must be lasting, not like it was years ago when Ukraine was forced to give up Crimea and part of our east, part of Donbass, and Putin simply used it as a springboard for a new attack, or when Ukraine was given so-called security guarantees in 1994, but they didn't work. Of course, Crimea should not have been given up then, just as Ukrainians did not give up Kyiv, Odessa, or Kharkiv after 2022. Ukrainians are fighting for their land, for their independence. Now, our soldiers have successes in Donetsk and Sumy regions. I am confident that we will defend Ukraine, effectively guaranteed security, and that our people will always be grateful to the president, everyone in America, and every partner and ally for their support and invaluable assistance. Russia must end this war, which it started itself, and I hope that our joint strength with America, with our European friends, will force Russia into a real peace. Thank you. We then were able to see a statement from the President of the United States, and this is the statement that we have. President Zelensky of Ukraine can end the war with Russia almost immediately if he wants to, or he can continue to fight. Remember how it started. No getting back, let's see. Hold up, folks. I gotta make sure. Yeah, I'm just gonna read it for what it is, folks. So I'll restart it again and read the whole thing with no censor. President Zelensky of Ukraine can end the war with Russia almost immediately if he wants to, or he can continue to fight. Remember how it started. No getting back Obama giving Crimea 12 years ago without a shot being fired, and no going into NATO by Ukraine. Some things never change. And so those are the two statements that we have on social media at the moment, one by Zelensky and one by the President of the United States on the meeting that will be happening tomorrow. And considering the difference in the statements that we're seeing right now, I'll have to be entirely honest with y'all. I am heavily expecting that tomorrow will be end up becoming the classic ambush. We already are hearing that the vice president will be in attendance in person, apparently sitting beside the president. And we've also been able to hear that there's been some strategic decisions that have been made that, just to be entirely honest with y'all, this is going to end up becoming an ambush. One, it was originally stated that the President of the United States was going to meet with Zelensky and the European leaders who arrived all in the same room at the same time. We then heard that so many European leaders have agreed to show up that now he's going to be barring them from entering the room with Zelensky. He's going to be talking to Zelensky on his own with the vice president beside him. And then later, after they get done talking whatever they're going to talk, they're going to end up talking to all the European leaders to pretty much tell them how it's going to go. Based off of that one change, just to tell y'all a little bit about how that would work in person, the fact that the other European leaders had been removed was generally trying to make sure to balance the playing field and the amount of agreeing and disagreeing voices, or generally to put it in the benefit of the side of the president, which generally, to be entirely honest with y'all, is giving me an idea that tomorrow is going to end up being an ambush on Zelensky, and generally a lot of blame will be thrown on him for the war continuing, and the lack of an acceptance of demands that the president of the United States is going to be making, somewhat on the behalf of the Russians as well.
I find it kind of interesting that Zelensky's bringing along so many European leaders. He's not just bringing along just a few of them. He's bringing along basically the entire EU alliance. It's going to be Macron. That's a huge notable name right there. It's coming along. It's also going to be Merz from Germany as well. So he's got some heavy hitters coming along with him. But the catch, like the enforcer just mentioned, is they are saying that the U.S. president does not want to meet with all these individuals together. He wants to meet with Zelensky one-on-one. And like the enforcer also mentioned, it's going to be the same cast of characters that was at the initial White House meeting months ago. So that has people concerned. It also has, obviously, I'm sure Zelensky concerned as well, that this might be another public version of an ambush on him politically. So hopefully it's not, but at least this time, Zelensky does have representation that generally backs up his position this time at least, but we'll have to wait and see. I think that the president might not do exactly what he did last time, because it really didn't go over too well with pretty much anybody. So they might tone it down a bit this time, maybe, but we'll have to wait and see. We'll be live streaming that tomorrow, by the way, at 1 p.m. Eastern. We'll be live streaming that whole event. It's going to be something to definitely watch.
And of course, we have some of the heaviest hitting leaders in Europe that will be present. And to explain a little bit of what will be going on as a result of this, let me explain the leaders who are present and the kind of position that they're in geopolitically. First, in this order of faces, many of y'all may be familiar with them, many of y'all may not. And to be entirely honest, man, I'm going to have a refresher, a reminder of who this person is in the bottom left, because I've
That is von der Leyen. She's the EU Commission head or chief.
Okay, good, because I was sitting there and I was like, there. I do not know what country she's in charge of, because most of the time, folks, I know who the national leaders' faces are, and the NATO General Secretary, who is Jens Stoltenberg, right here. But I did not know who that lady was.
That's actually not Jens right there. That is actually Mark Rutte. Actually, he's the new
Oh yeah,
NATO Secretary General.
different guy, same position. Stoltenberg was the last guy. This is Mark Rutte. But beyond that, to explain the position that the five top leaders are in, this is Chancellor Merz of the Federal Republic of Germany. He's currently the leader of the Federal Republic of Germany, and Germany is the largest economic power inside of Europe. So that is a incredibly important voice as far as the economic engine of the European Union and generally the European section of NATO is concerned. And for that reason, his voice would carry a decent amount of sway, at least on what's going on the continent. We also have Keir Starmer, who is the current Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. I would have to tell y'all, at least given the current atmosphere of British politics over about the past 8 years, you may or may not expect for Starmer to be around that long. He may actually disappear somewhat quickly, because generally, at least in this current phase of British politics, prime ministers arrive and disappear quite quickly, at least in the modern day. Many of y'all will know of Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss and other prime ministers who had quite literally some of the shortest tenures of prime minister seen in British history. So we do not know if he's going to be around for that much longer. The continuation of the British position will remain steadfast because their stance on Ukraine is a largely united front amongst the Tories and the Labour Party. So even if a Tory prime minister came into power, while a lot domestically might change in the UK because that would show that there's a new majority government that's been formed, the actual foreign policy position on Ukraine would still remain resolute. But generally, Keir Starmer will be representing the United Kingdom, not attached to the European Union, but still a significant power player inside of the NATO alliance, generally considered, at least militaristically in NATO, to be the second most important voice only behind the United States. Then we have the president of the French Republic, Emmanuel Macron. Macron is probably the most influential voice who will be present as far as the future of what the Western alliance will look like, because Macron has generally positioned France to be the foreign policy leader or head of the entirety of the European Union as well as NATO simultaneously. While Merz and Starmer are somewhat important in their positions as a major economic player and a major military alliance member, Macron has positioned himself to be a larger speaking voice for the future of what Europe may become. And depending on how this goes tomorrow, we could see that Macron may begin again, if it goes poorly in his opinion, the push to try and create a separate European sphere with the French Republic at the head. This lady right here, unfortunately, I do not know her name off the top of my head, but she is actually the Prime Minister of Italy. The Prime Minister of Italy does hold a somewhat important position, not the most important. I believe her name is Meloni, but it's not the most important position. The Italian military and economy is generally something of a middleweight, getting on up towards the heavyweight category, at least economically within their region. But her voice would carry a decent amount of significance because there is a decent amount of U.S. bases that are strategically placed inside of Italy. We also do know that the EU Commissioner will be present, as well as the leader of Finland, who is a fairly new face as far as things are concerned in NATO. Finland was just accepted into the NATO alliance in late 2023 and has only been around for about a year and a half at this point. But his voice will be carrying a great deal of weight, considering that he comes from a frontier country of the NATO alliance and it directly borders the Russian Federation. And from what we understand, we do know that there's about 100,000 Russian forces built up on the border currently. And then we have the NATO General Secretary, Mark Rutte. I incorrectly stated he was Jens Stoltenberg earlier. He's actually Mark Rutte. And once again, we all know that the NATO General Secretary holds more so of a diplomatic position position in trying to keep everyone on the same page in NATO, but doesn't really have a lot of administrative power that he can wield against any member of NATO. And then, of course, we will have President Zelensky, who is pretty much the entire epicenter of the meeting that will be happening tomorrow, considering that the state of Ukraine is the question in matter. But outside of that, this is probably the largest, at least to be entirely honest with y'all, with the meeting of Macron, Merz, and Starmer, this is probably going to be the most important summit or meeting that can happen with the United States of America and Ukraine, because these three primarily generally have the power to sway the entirety of Europe in a different direction if they do not like how this goes. So that's actually going to be something a little bit crucial, at least tomorrow, and we'll have to see how this turns out as far as foreign policy is concerned, because if these three leaders in particular do not like the action that is made, we could see that they start to take the European Union, or at least the European portion of NATO, on in a totally different direction beyond the EU Commissioner, the Prime Minister of Italy, the Prime Minister of Finland, or the NATO General Secretary, or Zelensky for that matter. But with that, I hope that does address that at least the best I can at the moment. And also, speaking of that, at least right now, I also want to get into some things before we get into this question that we've asked all of y'all that is a little bit important, because we have been able to hear that some voices have already started to voice some concern about the future of Europe and the kind of situation that we're seeing right now. For one, Macron has already commented on the upcoming peace talks and has stated that Putin is offering Ukraine not peace but capitulation. The only ones who can speak about Ukrainian territories are the Ukrainian authorities. According to him, the Europeans will ask the United States to what extent he is ready to join security guarantees, and he also underlined that for a long-term peace, Ukraine needs to have a stronger army, meaning that the French are eyeballing a military buildup inside of the Ukraine, supporting and building up the Ukrainian armed forces jointly. We also have been able to hear that they believe in France that this is going to be the most consequential for peace and security in Europe as far as the summit is concerned. Not only that, but the Polish have also weighed in as well. We've been able to see that a significant leading voice in Poland of the Polish parliament has weighed in and stated that, for the record, since 1994, Ukraine already has guarantees of independence and inviolability of borders, also from Russia. In addition, on the 22nd of April 2004, Vladimir Putin solemnly ratified the treaty on the Russian-Ukrainian border. Suffice to respect them, and the war is over. So it does appear that there are already a decent amount of forefront European voices on the matter that are making it quite clear that they believe that a position of strength must be represented against the Russians. Otherwise, the situation could become quite perilous for their security as a united European economic and military alliance. But Matthew, what are people thinking with this in mind, and given the context, what the future of this sort of a peace deal or peace talk will be like tomorrow in the White House? And what are you thinking about it as well?
All right. So it looks like Zelensky has reaffirmed and basically doubled down and said Ukraine cannot give up land to Russia. It's a constitutional issue that Ukraine cannot just simply give a land away. It's prohibited by their constitution. So obviously the meeting is coming up tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern with the U.S. president about this exact issue. And we basically have the stage set for a major issue here between those two. I'll be perfectly honest up front. But what are your thoughts? 82% said Zelensky will refuse a peace deal, while 9% said he'll be forced into a peace deal, and 4% said I'm 50-50 on this question. And I think at this point, it's fair to say that based on all the speculation and all the behind-the-scenes reporting we received, it sounds like Zelensky is going to refuse any peace deal because it all involves giving up Ukrainian land, and he stated he can't do that legally, or otherwise he'd be violating the Constitution. So I'm really not sure what the objective of the meeting tomorrow even is. Nobody's even really saying what the objective is. We can only read into it and basically determine that the U.S. is trying to pressure Zelensky into something that he probably doesn't want to do. So the fact that the EU leaders are there, I think that helps Zelensky. We'll have to see exactly what their involvement is in tomorrow's meeting. Right now, we're not really sure exactly how much they're going to be involved in the whole thing, but they will be there at least. So I guess they can provide some moral support, but I'm not really sure what to expect, to be honest with you. I'm very fascinated to see what's going to happen, also a bit concerned to see what's going to happen as well. But I think Zelensky will hold his ground and refuse the deal if it requires giving up land to Russia, because he knows that if he gives up land to Russia, they'll be back again a second time to take even more land when they rearm. So I'm with 82%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to be entirely honest with you all. I would have to be with the 82%. I think that the peace deal that's going to be proposed tomorrow is not going to be accepted by the Ukrainians. Not only that, the president will probably be proposing a deal that isn't even fully representative of the Russian position on the matter. And for that reason, even if Ukraine accepted it through the arm bending that may occur tomorrow, that does not mean that the Russians will still be happy with it. Because I also want to make this a little bit clear. The Russians have made demands at this moment that the Ukrainians have to change their national language to Russian, and that they also have to hold elections immediately and change their entire constitution. Pretty much meaning that the Russians are going to turn Ukraine into a Russian puppet state. So generally the Ukrainians, while they might get on the page, or they might be forced onto the page of pretty much ceding or giving up large amounts of territory, they'll never get on the page, at least with the Russians, about changing the official language of the country to Russian, and also changing the constitution to pretty much allow the Russians to run the nation as a puppet state. None of that's going to happen, or none of that will be agreed to by the Ukrainians. So I generally have a feeling that the peace deal that will be offered is refused tomorrow, and even if it was accepted, this still is not going to go anywhere, because the Russians will only impose the further demands that I just listed that they already spoke of in Anchorage just a few days ago, and that will once again make this a non-deal. And then we'll be back to square one where we're at right now, where the war continues. So I hope that
Now, also, Enforcer, remember, we also heard some rumors. And remember, this is all rumors, folks. Like all these stories going around you hear from these journalists about how they know what's going to happen tomorrow and they've heard things in the background. Sometimes it turns out to be BS and sometimes it turns out to be true. But we've heard some rumors that maybe the U.S. president was able to get Putin to agree to some sort of Article 5 protection for Ukraine and some type of peace deal. That is a rumor running around right now. I'm not really sure how accurate that really is or if it's truthful or whatever, but it seems to me that could be something that maybe sways the equation a little bit. But I'm going to run a poll on it and actually ask that question here in a second, so I'm going to withhold my opinion a bit. But Enforcer, what do you think about that? Do you think that's an accurate statement that's being reported, or is that probably not the case?
I would have to say that it probably might be an inaccurate statement, because the Russian Federation, at least from our current understanding of the negotiation positions over the past few months, have never agreed to such a thing. In fact, they have completely turned it away as best as they could. So them making a complete 180 and saying that some sort of assurances or Article 5-like security guarantees would be given to the Ukrainians is something that I'm generally not believing at this moment. The Russians probably made no such statement of that, and probably would never make a statement along those lines, but that generally would stop them from forcing the Ukrainians into becoming a puppet state later. If they're getting NATO-like Article 5 protections, that practically means that Ukraine is a NATO member without being in NATO at that point. So why in the world would the Russians ever agree to that? A big part of this conflict is making sure that the Russians push back against the NATO alliance and pretty much create their own sphere in Eastern Europe. So that wouldn't really make a lot of sense if they would agree to something like that. And if they did, that's a major shift in the Russian negotiation tactics, or at least points, and doesn't really make a great deal of sense still, even if they did that. Also, really quickly, folks, before I move on, I do have to say that hopefully we'll have a little bit more ban hammering going on tonight, because there is a significant amount of bots, and I've been seeing them running wild. I've been trying to moderate them the best I can, so hopefully we will be able to control that situation a little bit better, because I know that a lot of people have been complaining about it, and I have been seeing that the chat's kind of running wild at this point, so hopefully we can start to
I've
work
been banning them.
There's a load of them, man. Like, I saw one, like, his name was Christ is King. He was in here for like 5 or 7 minutes or so. I finally got him, but there's been a good amount of them tonight. They're flooding in like in mass. But with that, it is time for us to get on into the next question that we have about those Article 5 style protections and what people are thinking about them. And so, Matthew, what are people thinking about them, and what are you thinking about it as well?
All right, so the question is, should Ukraine accept a peace deal if U.S. officials offer Ukraine Article 5 style protection? And right now, that's the rumor. We're not sure if that's the case, but if they were to offer that, what do you think about that situation? So 48% said no, that will cause World War III faster, and 25% said yes, that would be a good deal, and 15% said I'm 50-50 on the topic. And I will say, on its face, it sounds like a decent deal, but the catch is, though, if we're going to give Ukraine Article 5 style protection, why not let them into NATO, the actual alliance itself? What's the difference if we're going to give them Article 5 protection anyway? So that's a bit of a shaky thing. Also, as well, if we're going to give them Article 5 protection and we truly believe that Russia and Putin himself is a maniac that's hell-bent on basically recreating the Russian Empire, it seems like that would basically commit us to basically a direct war with Russia much quicker than previously anticipated. So in my opinion, that seems like a recipe for causing World War III faster, because then we're obligated under that Article 5 style protection to then come in with armed support on the ground with soldiers to protect Ukraine on the ground, which would mean we're in a direct conflict with Putin at that point. So It seems to me the better plan would be to give Ukraine the arms they need to actually fight the Russians and let them handle it, since they're already handling it quite well. Just simply give them what they need to fight them instead of creating a situation where we basically start World War III by trying to desperately enter into a peace deal. So I'm with the 46%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that I would be with the 46%. I do believe that this will probably accelerate World War III because it's putting Ukraine in a really weird position where they're not in NATO, but they technically kind of are in NATO. So if the Russians invade them again, they have the argument to say, well, they're technically not in NATO, but there is also some form of an Article 5 protection, at least under this theory, that would exist, that would pretty much force us to get involved. Either the Europeans would have to get involved, or we'd all have to get involved in the conflict. And that is something that is guaranteed to happen. Right now, with what the Russians are doing, they're either trying to secure a ceasefire to be able to buy themselves time and put themselves in a more advantageous position for the second phase of this war, or they're trying to get some form of a peace treaty to also put themselves into an incredibly advantageous second phase of the war. Either way, war is guaranteed beyond this point. We already heard in the past, much like many have said, that the Russian Federation promised up and down they would never invade Ukraine. Leading up to the invasion in 2022, they promised that to everyone in Europe. They called up Macron, they called up everyone, and they told them we would never invade Ukraine. We promise you it's just a military exercise. Everything is fine, everything is good, nothing will happen. And then on February 23rd of that year, they invaded the state of Ukraine. So that once again shows us that the Russians are not to be taken at face value at their word, and they generally do not follow through on their promises. So with that in mind, they will begin a second phase of this war because they have a concept, at least in their minds, that demands that they expand westwards. If it's not Ukraine, it's the Baltics. If it's not the Baltics, it's Finland. If it's not Finland, the Baltics, or Ukraine, it's parts of Poland. So they will guarantee be moving on beyond this this situation they'll be getting in a ceasefire or a peace treaty that they're going to be getting if they get it at all. So I would generally have to say this will most likely accelerate the Third World War and make it more of a certainty at this point. I have a feeling that the only way to really avoid this situation is to support the Ukrainians to the point that the Russians just lose the war economically and militarily. At that point, the Russian government is not in a fighting position or fighting condition, and then we generally are able to avoid this conflict altogether. But giving up now and conceding territory to them is not going to be the way to win. The British and the French thought that at the Munich Agreement of 1938, and they've learned their lesson that that was the bad idea. The U.S. government needs to understand it is a life or death scenario at this moment for many Americans and many Europeans at this moment, that we can create the same conditions and the same concessions that were seen in the 1938 Munich Conference. It will end up in disaster, much like the Munich Conference did.
Am I the only one that has a hard time believing that Vladimir Putin really agreed to an Article 5 style protection for Ukraine? Like, that seems to go contrary to pretty much any type of previous stance that Putin's ever taken throughout this entire war. He says that's the whole reason why he started the war. Like, that's the Russian propaganda. He said NATO was expanding toward Russia's border, and the main cornerstone and the basically the crux of NATO membership is the Article 5 guarantee, which is the Common Defense Alliance of the NATO alliance itself. So why would he now agree to that if the entire problem in the first place was NATO membership for Ukraine? That was the entire problem the entire time. I'm not calling anybody a liar, but I'm saying it sounds very, very unrealistic that Putin would have agreed to that, because it just doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make a lot of sense at all, but if I'm not mistaken, I believe that Czechoslovakia was given some sort of a similar agreement in the Munich conference that Britain and France would come to their aid in the future if they just gave up the Sudetenland. I'm pretty sure that that was in the Munich conference. Let me go look. Let's see here. The Munich conference of 1938. Let's take a little gander and let's see what we got. Let's see here. I'm trying to read through the major notes.
Also, while you're looking through that, another thing as well that I don't understand is we've heard obviously that they're going to talk about maybe giving Article 5 protections to Ukraine as well. But, here's another disturbing reality, another possibility. Maybe Putin is hell-bent on starting war with NATO, and he's thinking, I'll say whatever I need to say right now to simply buy time to arm myself, arm Russia, and to get ready to really go hard on maybe a Baltic state or reinvade Ukraine later. And he needs to say whatever he needs to say right now. If it means agreeing to something as insane as Article Article 5 protections for Ukraine. Maybe he's willing to go that far to deceive the West, so that way he can buy himself some time, kind of like Hitler did back during the agreement there in Munich. He bought himself about 12 months when he did that with Chamberlain, and then he invaded Poland. It could be something like that. That's a real possibility. It sounds a little far-fetched now, but it could be maybe his mindset.
So really quickly, let me actually read you all this, because this is actually the exact situation we're in right now. This is the moment that we're in if this happened. The Munich Agreement was followed by the First Vienna Award on the 2nd of November of 1938, separating largely Hungarian-inhabited territories in southern Slovakia and the southern Subcarpathian Rus from Czechoslovakia. On the 30th of November, Czechoslovakia ceded to Poland small patches of land on the Spiš and Orava regions. In March 1939, the First Slovak Republic, a German puppet state, proclaimed its independence. Shortly afterwards, Hitler reneged on his promise to respect the integrity of Czechoslovakia by occupying the remainder of the country and creating the Protectorate of Bohemia-Moravia. The conquered nation's military arsenal played an important role in Germany's invasions of Poland and France in 1939 and 1940. So once again, we can see here that at least as far as the Munich conference went, there actually was an agreement made by Hitler, or the Germans, which in the modern day would be the Russians, that they would respect the integrity of the remainder of Czechoslovakia and go no farther than the Sudetenland. And that's what Putin's saying right now. If this is the case, I will only take the Donbass and Crimea and some parts of Kherson and Zaporizhia, practically the Ukrainian Sudetenland in a sense, and I will respect the territorial integrity of Ukraine, and I will go no farther, and we'll all agree that Ukraine is a sweet little country, and it's a little unique thing. And
it's within his style. It's literally Putin's style. Because you remember before the Ukraine invasion started back in 2022, Putin was on the phone with the German Chancellor Scholz. He was also on the phone with Emmanuel Macron as well, and both Macron and Scholz were asking Putin, surely you're not going to invade Ukraine. Like, assure us that you're not going to do that. That would be insane for you to do. And tell us, Putin, and basically assure us that you're not going to do it. And Putin said on the phone, he said, don't worry, I'm not going to do it. He hung the phone up. He lined his tanks up on the border with Ukraine and started those military exercises. And literally, after lying directly to the NATO alliance members' faces, he started the invasion in 2022. Putin really does lie like that. He's done it so many times over in the past, and this would not be an exception if he did it this time.
Also, really quickly, I saw someone say this. This was a comment worth addressing. Gamal Abraham said, "That's a lot of BS, y'all saying. Maybe Putin see his people are suffering. A lot of soldiers died and their economy are crippled. He can change his mind just to bring peace to his country." So did Hitler do that? Or did Stalin do that? Or did Mao do that? Which one of those people did that? You know, which one of those totalitarian dictators that are in the similar camp as Putin, which one of those made that selfless decision to stop the bloodshed and the suffering of their people, to bring an end to any war? Which one of them? None of them did. And you know why? Because it does not matter the situation of their people. Their people are below them. The country exists to prop them up and allow them to be in a comfortable position. It does not matter how many people have to die. It does not matter how bad the economy gets off. It does not matter any of those things. All of those things are secondary to the survival and sake of the leader. That's always how it's been. Did Hitler ever go, oh my God, so many German men have died fighting the Soviet Union. Maybe we need to negotiate a peace with the Soviets. No, he ended up saying everyone's going to fight till the last man, and they literally fought even after he ended up, offing himself in the Fuhrer bunker, up until the 8th of May. Like, they didn't stop at all. He demanded that they fight until the last man. They sit there and go, oh, like the Allies, they really kind of stopped me from invading Britain and forcing them out of the war. And also the United States has joined now. Maybe I need to come to some negotiated settlement now that they're advancing across the Rhine into Germany. No, absolutely not. He said, we're going to blow up anything of value that's left standing that the Allies didn't bomb yet, and everyone's going to fight until the last man. In fact, we are going to create the Volkssturm. We're just going to get every old man and child in the country, arm them with some kind of a weapon, and send them running at the Soviets or the Americans to try and kill them. And we're going to keep this thing going until the end of time. They were so bad off by that point, if y'all don't know, that the members of the Volkssturm, if they were equipped with any uniform, were equipped with uniforms that were made out of paper mache. Like, I'm not even kidding. The material situation was so bad that the clothes were made out of this paper cardboard-like substance that would only hold up for maybe a couple of days, maybe a couple of weeks, and then it was completely useless. It had fallen apart by that point. That's how bad the material situation was in the country. It was so bad off by the time the war was ending that most tanks, if they were even being produced and put into service by that point, were entering service in their primer paint job. Germany had even run out of the ability to produce paint in large enough numbers to paint the tanks. So they would enter the battlefield in this red primer paint job because there was no paint left. And they were in that bad of a situation that they could not even make paint or clothes, and they still fought until the very last minute. Why in the world would Putin be any different? He has shown no reason to believe that he would be any different at this point. Has he ever cared about the suffering of the people of Chechnya, or the people in Georgia, or the people inside of Russia, or any of his political opponents that he's assassinated in the hundreds over the course of the past 2 decades? Has he ever cared about the Ukrainians and their suffering? Has he ever cared about the Russian army for 3.5 years? The answer to all that is no. So there is absolutely no reason or logical standing to say that for some reason the Grinch's heart grew 3 times its size this night and he's had a change of heart. This guy is an absolute bastard, and it's a good thing to understand that and get on that level, because Hitler, Stalin, Mao, and all of these other totalitarian dictators like Francisco Franco and so on were bastards up until the moment they died. So there's no reason to think that they'd change. So
it's really crazy too, the parallels between Hitler and Putin today. Like, I know that's become a cliche comparison between those two, but it's really remarkable how close together they truly are. Hitler argued back in the day that all the land that Germany was seizing was rightfully Germany's land, and that they were getting more living space, or Lebensraum. That's what he argued. You'll notice that Putin's making the exact same argument. He's saying that Ukraine's not even a real state, and that's actually Russian lands historically. That's what his argument is. It's almost identical to the same arguments that Hitler made back in the day for invading countries. It's so parallel. It makes you wonder. It's like, how close is history going to replicate itself? If this goes the way that history tells us it's going to go, we better put our foot down now, or it's going to cost millions of lives down the road, because we're about to enter World War III, because we have a new Hitler, which is Putin, in charge of Russia at this point. And the similarities are really horrifying.
Yeah, I would have to say it's absolutely horrifying to think. And if it's going to happen, because at this point, if we could see territory in Ukraine, we just let the Russians start World War III on a better footing in reality. And if we don't concede territory Ukraine, we start World War III with the Russians at a worse footing. So if World War III is going to start either way, wouldn't we want the Russians to be at the greatest disadvantage at the start of that war, instead of giving them any concessions or any inch of ground? Wouldn't that be a better position to be in if we believe that World War III is guaranteed to start over this situation no matter what? I mean, hell, I would say that the Russians ought to be put at a disadvantage. That would make a lot of sense to me. But before we move on into the rest of our news for the night, which we still have a great deal of, I do want to make sure to take a small little breather for just a moment to be able to recognize some top donors, because we've gotten up to $1,800 raised on the fundraiser. We're only $700 short of the fundraiser goal, and hopefully we'll be able to make up that little extra bit of ground and reach the goal here in the latter part of this stream. But Matthew, who are the top donors who have thrown in support so far tonight? And also, what kind of questions do we have?
All right, so we are now sitting at about $1,800 raised overall on the goal, and we're getting so close. It is barely, or it's actually about to get there, actually. So reading off our top donors since the beginning of the stream until now, we had a 100 from Hal Rose, as well as a 100 from The Martian, as well as a 100 from Activista, as well as Espen Tjørnshagen, as well as Jeff Johns, who put in a 100, and also Just Chillin' as well, who threw in a 100. We also had a 61 from Old Warrior, as well as a 50 from Snow White, a 50 from Uncle David Other Nephew, as well as Howard Mendelson, Cliff H., John Combus, and Rumpelstiltskin. And a huge shout out to all of our top donors, by the way, and everybody else that's thrown in support to the fundraiser, because it's y'all making this possible every single Sunday. And this channel has raised over $1.5 million for charity since the very beginning of the channel being founded, and it is truly a massive amount that the LSA has raised. And we do appreciate every single Sunday everybody throwing in the fundraiser amounts, of course. But also, by the way, if I've missed you somehow, let me know and I will call off your donation. I believe I've gotten everybody, but YouTube has taken away the feature to go back and see donations in the past, so I can only see them while they're in the chat, and beside that, I can't see them at all. So I wish they'd bring that back, honestly, because that'd be a huge help. But a huge shout out to everybody once again, and Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to say a massive shout out to everyone who supported the fundraiser so far tonight. All the folks we were able to call out, and all the folks who we weren't able to call off, as
Holy
Nicholas
moly.
Condor throws in a $250. Holy
Damn, son.
smokes! And gets us on up there to $2,010. We are only $500 away, just about, from the $2,500 goal. And I gotta say that is an absolutely incredible thing, an insane thing, because we are getting insanely close at this point. I gotta thank everyone who's been supporting the fundraiser tonight, and all the folks who are going to support the fundraiser tonight for y'all's support, because y'all continue to support American and Western interests around the world for years at this point, absolute years. And I gotta say that that's a truly incredible thing to know, that everyone's been banding together for 3.5 years in this channel to raise about $1.6 million to help out folks overseas in support of American and Western interests. So a huge thanks to all of y'all once again. And also, Matthew, what kind of questions do we have? Do we have a couple of questions that we can answer?
Yes, we do. And believe it or not, we have actually 2 super chats that came in tonight. YouTube has still not patched that thing where you can throw in a super chat on the donation night. So we have 2 super chats, and we'll address those first, and then a live chat question, and then get right back to the news. So our first one here goes to Sundown, who puts in a 5. They said, Enforcers, what U.S. Navy aircraft carriers are in war zones currently that you're aware of?
Unfortunately, I would not know exactly how many of them are around. I know that currently under CENTCOM's area of responsibility, I believe that the USS Carl Vinson has actually departed and has returned back to the United States. I also understand the USS Harry S. Truman is back in the States at the moment. The USS Nimitz is currently under Indo-PACOM's command. And I believe there is another carrier that's currently under Indo-PACOM's command that's been permanently deployed to Japan. Unfortunately, I wouldn't know the name of that one, but those 2 carriers are currently deployed. There are also, I think, some other carrier group. I think there is one carrier group that may be in the Atlantic at the moment. But I think that would be just about all of them right now. I wouldn't know off the top of my head the exact figure or the amount of carriers that are underway, but I can tell you that the ones I stated, those are underway. It's just that I don't know about the rest of the carrier groups beyond those, whether they're underway or not. But I hope that does address that at least the best I can off of the top of my head. And with that, we are on to the second to last question of this segment.
All right, and also in the meantime, a big shout out to Steve, who just threw in a $50 donation to the fundraiser, by the way, and also Wainara Sokofor, excuse me, for also throwing in a $50 donation as well, and they have brought us up to almost $2,200 raised, and we are now officially $300 away from the goal. So getting very close to reaching that fundraiser goal, and I am very confident we'll probably hit it here in the next 20 minutes, thanks to the LSA. So jumping into our next super chat, this one goes to Tom M, and he puts in a 5. He said, I can't donate from Australia. Is something broken?
And I would have to say no. Apparently there's some sort of a law that exists in Australia that makes it impossible for Australian viewers to support the fundraiser. It's been like that the entire time we've run this channel. So it's not broken. It's just that for some reason your local laws do not allow for the fundraiser to be as supported. But I hope that addresses that the best I can. I do thank you for the support. I hope that does address that well. And also, we just had to get rid of a bot, folks. Bobby Boccolino, who said Zelensky profits from war and he's a money laundering kingpin and Putin is not. If you think that Putin is such an admirable and grand leader, I suggest you move to Russia. Traitors of the Republic should move to wherever their loyalties truly lie. And I think that you'll find that you'll be treated incredibly well. They have this great little spot for you in the army. They'll conscript you immediately and send you straight to the front. And there you can see the reality of what the Russians truly treat people like. If the United States treats people, even like you, who generally are traitorous of this country, quite well, the Russians will treat you, although you're probably a loyalist to Putin, quite poorly. So I highly advise you to go over there and see what a true loyalist to Putin is actually treated like, instead of the fantasy that a lot of Americans have in their mind. But with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, actually, hold up, folks. We just hit the goal. Hey!
Oh, what? We did?
We hit the goal. from a
Anonymous threw in a
$275 donation from an anonymous viewer. We have just hit the goal. We did it.
Igor, we smashed the goal. Yes, sir. We've hit it all. Yes, sir. We have hit the goal. We've hit the goal. Such a beautiful goal. Golden goal. I love to see it, I tell you.
Unreal. And Urban Ruble threw in a 123, and Danny B threw in a 50, and another anonymous 200. It is blowing up. We've almost got to $3,000 raised on the fundraiser. Unbelievable. Absolutely incredible stuff. Really incredible stuff. People say, wow, it's a great fundraiser, an incredible fundraiser. Who in the world could ever do better? And not us, not us. The Least Spring Army does the greatest job at fundraising. Everyone goes, where's all the fundraisers? They're here on this channel, and we fundraise like no other. Surely the greatest, truly incredible. It's the biggest. People say, wow, that's really big. That's the greatest fundraiser ever seen, and it really is. It's a great, wonderful fundraiser. And I gotta say, an amazing, incredible thing. A huge thanks to all of the donors who supported tonight. Y'all are a massive help to Western and American interest around the world and helping out our allies like those in Ukraine. So a big thanks to y'all so much once again. And with that, we are on.
Also, by the way, big shout out to Greg Carrier, by the way. Just threw in a 50 as well. We are about to hit $3,000 raised, which is almost $500 above the goal, literally within minutes of talking about hitting the goal. So that's crazy to see right there once again, but a huge shout out to you, Greg Carrier, for that massive donation as well. But also, Enforcer, we have one more question to get to before we move on to our new segment here, and this one goes to the live chat, and this one goes to In Hansen, who said, what are your thoughts on Putin in Alaska being a body double? And honestly, In Hansen, we discussed that last night. We ran a poll on it. I saw today that people were trying to make that a mainstream thing, like they had evidence to back that up. There is no evidence to show that that was a body double in Alaska. Now, it's fair to say that it could have been, because we do know that Putin does use body doubles inside of Russia, but we don't have any evidence to say that was a body double in Alaska. So, honestly, the people reporting that as fact, or, putting that in titles, I would say that's honestly not very good reporting, because there's nothing to back that up. So, I would disagree with that generally, but Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to say it didn't look like a body double. Body doubles are not supposed to go to the main event. They're supposed to go to other events around the area to be able to distract from where the leader of Russia is, or to at least throw off the leads of possible assassins. So the Putin that was in Anchorage was the real Putin, from what I can tell. And a lot of people, like, here's the thing, folks. A lot of people always say that there are body doubles. Like, I have heard endlessly, like, these endless conspiracy theories about everyone in America is a body double. Kanye isn't Kanye. Kanye's a body double. Look at this picture taken 3 years ago and look at this one today. He's like somewhat different in some sense. Or that the last president had like 9 gazillion body doubles and was being replaced every week like a car. And then the current president's also maybe even a body double, and that Epstein isn't really dead. He's wandering around in Nebraska. There's like an endless amount of conspiracy theories that people are always being replaced, or there's body doubles or something like that, and it just doesn't really stand up to scrutiny. Like, the people, like, there are body doubles out there, and Putin does have body doubles, but the one in Anchorage was not a body double from what we can tell. And like, I just want to say that really quickly, because like the amount of times that I've seen like people who like and it's always from people who really don't like someone. I would say that disliking Putin is a norm in this country these days, and statistically it is. But people who don't like folks always want to say that they're not real people and they're like a body double or something, because I saw through the last presidency, it's like this endless thing of saying that the last president that we had before this one was not even the real president. He had been replaced like a year into his presidency with like 3 different body doubles, and they like interchanged them here and there, because they were like, look at the pictures, he looks different. Like, lighting and the angle and everything might make him look slightly different, because if we have millions of pictures of us taken over the course of 20 or 30 years, a lot of people are probably going to go, oh, he looks like a body double, or something like that. But that's just not really the case. A lot of these people are the legitimate people, and the Putin in Anchorage, from what I could tell, was the real McCoy. But moving on from that, and on into the rest of the news that we have tonight, because we still have a lot of it to cover, and we actually are going to be running overtime on this news segment tonight. But moving on from that, we also were able to hear that apparently they are saying that it is a historic decision that the United States is ready to take part in security guarantees for Ukraine. At least that was one statement from Zelensky. He also made another statement saying that giving away Ukrainian territory is constitutionally not possible for the state of Ukraine. And also we were able to hear at least a rumor, according to Witkoff, that the U.S. secured a concession from Russia, allowing Washington to extend NATO-style Article 5 protection guarantees to Ukraine, although that might not really be the case. Moving on out of that, we have also been able to hear from the People's Republic of China some interesting developments. For one, we were able to see them conducting an air defense rehearsal
猛士，对，
with the
这是
rip-off
猛士3，
Humvee.
现在咱们装备了差不多10万辆。我靠！这他妈，我操，这是什么？
I think they're either shocked, excited, or something. I'm not sure.
I don't really know. It's a good question.
像是导弹啊！
I think he said that looks cheap. It looks like something I could have made in my
机
basement.
房，导弹。
I think he may have, actually.
And these are all going to the military parade, these are?
Apparently these are a part of an air defense drill, that are not affiliated with the parade.
Interesting.
这么多呀！
This is most likely an air defense perimeter that's being set up in preparation of the parade. But moving on from that clip, because it's 3 minutes long, just showing equipment driving by, we also were able to see some new drones being spotted in photography taken by citizens of new drones that are apparently going to be displayed at the military parade. We can see some of them here. I wouldn't be able to tell you all the specific variants. That is actually, I know what that one is. That is actually a wing long. Like, I know that one because of the silly name. And also the fact that it has long wings, which is pretty indicative of the whole wing long thing. But anyways, we also have this drone here, which apparently I've heard has had some malfunctions, and so the Chinese have named it something wrong to go along with wing long. But nevertheless, it does appear that they're getting their drone forces ready for the presentation at the military parade, which is soon to be happening here, very soon. And moving on from that and on into the area of Europe, we have also been able to hear that there is continued unrest inside of Serbia. I won't be showing any of the clips because we are very pressed for time, but protests are still continuing inside of Novi Sad and Belgrade in Serbia against the Serbian government over alleged corruption issues. Moving on out of that and into the Russian Federation, we also were able to hear that the Russians are apparently being a little manipulative. That's shocking, isn't it? Because we were able to hear that Kirill A. Dmitriev, this is the guy who actually almost got his ass killed by a bear in Alaska on Friday, stated on his Twitter that European and British warmongers / saboteurs are in full panic mode, and they should not stay in the way of peace. Dove. Man, that's just like what Hitler's guy said right before World War II started. Nuts. But moving on from that, we also got to hear that down in the area of the little town of Ramenskoye, a fire actually broke out today. It appears that a little factory critical to the defense industry was cooking, and not cooking up what the Rock was cooking. Well, that's the end of the clip right there, and moving on from that and on out of that area, we are going to be moving on down into the state of Ukraine, where we were also able to hear that Zelensky has made a list of his own demands that would allow for him to accept a Russian position. At a press conference in Brussels, the Ukrainian president said Kyiv rejects several key points presented by the president. Ukraine's main condition, a ceasefire first, and only then work on a final agreement, generally working off of the normal geopolitical development of ending a conflict. Zelensky stressed the contact line is the best place for negotiations, but talks cannot be held under the pressure of weapons. He flatly rejected handing over Donetsk to Russia. The Constitution makes it impossible to surrender territory or trade land. And on security guarantees, he said there are no details yet, but Ukraine sees EU membership as part of those guarantees. So that generally is the position that we are hearing, at least at this moment, from the president of Ukraine. Outside of that, we also were able to hear in the Kursk Oblast that Russian forces were continuing to get hit by the Ukrainian 47th Magura, which we could see in this clip right here.
I like how they showed the Russian like going into the mud hut before they went in for the final little approach right there.
Man, they have to prove the combatants are inside of the structure, and they always do it on film, which is a great thing to see because it actually is following the rules of war that if a structure is used by a combatant, it can be engaged and destroyed. We see them also hitting surveillance equipment on top of the towers and also bunkers as well within the fields.
Also, by the way, to answer people's question real quick, people are asking, will we be covering the White House Zelensky U.S. President meeting tomorrow? We will be covering it, but here's the catch, though. We have to wait and see if we're going to get a live stream out of the White House's coverage, basically, because we can't show, for example, Reuters or another news outlet. If we do that, we'll get copyright strike, even though there's probably fair use. We'll probably still run into issues anyway. So if we have a feed, we'll be showing it on the live stream. If we don't have a feed, we'll probably just cover the events as they're going on and talk about what's happening without showing the video, but probably showing just pictures and also statements as well. So we'll have to kind of play that by ear and see how we're going to cover it. But generally, though, we're planning for a special Monday stream to cover that meeting tomorrow.
Also, folks, I do have to explain. I know a lot of people will be like, oh, it's fair use, run it. Just to quickly meet those statements at the head, running a stream on someone else's footage, at least on YouTube, is an incredibly dangerous thing that could open us up to some form of litigation, which is a form of a lawsuit, either on our end against whoever tried to copyright strike us, or them against us. Generally, with other people's footage, they have a right to protect their intellectual property, as it would be claimed, and we do not really have a reason to show their footage. Technically, the idea of fair use is not supposed to be an assertive claim. It's a defense to someone alleging copyright infringement. So they could copyright strike us, and then we have to defend ourselves by saying it was fair use. And as far as YouTube's concerned, the only way we can do that if they copyright strike us is to open up a lawsuit against them in court, and then we have to go through a lengthy and very expensive legal process in the copyright courts, which is a special federal court, to say whether or not that was fair use. And if that court deems that in the specific context of how we used the footage was not fair use, we then actually opened ourselves up to a return lawsuit by them for infringing on their copyrighted material, and then they can sue for damages. So it's a really risky thing to do that sort of a deal, so we generally just completely stray away from that. That's also why pretty much everyone on YouTube strays away from it, because from a legal perspective, it can get pretty tricky. But moving on from that and into the location unknowns, we also were able to see some new missiles that the Ukrainians are producing, the Firepoint FP5 Flamingo. It apparently has a reported range of 3,000 kilometers and a warhead of 1,000 kilograms. This is a pretty wild missile, actually. And, you know, it looks crazy here on this little infographic, but what's even crazier is that there's a real picture of one. These things actually do exist, and there it is right there.
That's a huge missile, honestly, right there. How much of a payload does that thing carry?
1,000 kilograms, which is equivalent to about 2,300 pounds.
So that's larger than like Israel's average bomb. That's the way I generally judge how large a munition is. The 2,000 pounders are what Israel uses to create those massive explosions whenever they attack. So this is slightly larger than that. So this is a doozy of a missile.
Yeah, it's a real doozy, actually. This thing's quite massive. And apparently it is like any other normal cruise missile. It has some sort of terrain mapping feature that allows for it to fly pretty much above the surface layer, or what would be called the ground, all the way to its target. So this thing actually will be able to strike practically anywhere in Russia. A 3,000 kilometer range actually means that this thing could strike well over the Urals, pretty much as far as Novosibirsk. So if the advertised information is correct, not only does this thing pack a massive punch, it is pretty much the equivalent of a JDAM, one of the larger JDAMs that the U.S. operates, but it also has the range to really be able to strike most anywhere where any economic activity or military activity is conducted within the Russian Federation. We also have to get into the casualty report, which it appears that in the midst of trying to put together the million pieces of news tonight, I actually did not put in, because there also wasn't a speech from Zelensky. So really quickly, let me go grab that and show that to y'all here really quickly. And so here we are, folks.
Also, by the way, huge shout to Hal Rose, by the way. He just threw in a $333 donation and brought us up to $3,349 raised in total. And a huge shout to you, Hal. That was very generous of you.
Hey, holy moly. Hal Rose coming in, killing it. A huge shout out to you, Hal Rose. I hope that does address your support incredibly well, because Hal Rose is a channel legend, and that support is, I think, one of the largest of the night. But moving on into the casualty report, we were able to hear that Miss Deesa stated, the keeper of the records, that troop losses trend downwards below 1,000. Vehicles are below average, but other categories are at or above, with August to date close to July averages. So it does appear that things are keeping somewhat steadier these days. but 900 Russian soldiers were wounded and killed over the past 24 hours, along with 8 APCs, 88 supply trucks, 4 main battle tanks, 49 artillery pieces, 186 drones, 1 MLRS, 1 anti-aircraft warfare system, and that was everything for the day. But still, quite nice to see, and it does appear that the Ukrainian armed forces are continuing to hammer the Russians. Outside of that, we also got to see in Vovchansk that the Ukrainians were also continuing to target and hit Russian forces with their drones in the 57th Brigade, which we could see right here, as the drone skillfully flies through incredibly cramped spaces as the Russians start firing at the drone, but it looks like they just won't be able to take care of it quick enough. It's trying to find them right now, and it's trying to see where they are. Oh, there he is, and it ran right into him. And now we can see another drone flying around the outside of the building. Oh, and there's a Russian right there. Like, get him, old boy, and they did. We can also see a small fire team of Russians here being targeted by a drone. And another fire team, which is attempting to fire and run at the same time. Not really an effective strategy, but looks like it failed nonetheless. Well, you can also see here another group of Russians hiding in the trees, which are also being targeted by the drones. We can also see them finding this one guy hiding in the tall weeds.
Just when you thought the field was empty, there's a Russian in the weeds. What do you know?
Man, the Ukrainians would be great at finding Waldo, honestly.
I think they just found him.
And that's the end of the clip. And they put up this little card at the end. Pretty interesting one. But moving on from that, we also got another clip of the Ukrainian border guards hitting the Russian forces within this area as well. Look, there's a Russian soldier. He's right down there. Oh, and there he goes. He just got some flight miles. He just got some flight miles with Aeroflot. Get more flight miles today by conscripting in the Russian army. Did you know that you can spend the rest of your life flying? Well, most people didn't, but you can if you join the Russian army. Join the Russian army today, and for the remainder of your life, you will be able to fly. I promise you. You don't even have to have a plane. First-class tickets are provided. No meals or services. It is a non-stop express flight from where you were standing to 5 feet away in the air the entire time. Just make sure to join the Russian army, and you will be able to have the experience of flight yourself. But moving on from
Third-rate flight, third-rate, trashy flight. I tell you what, that flight right there has never flown in its life. It's a terrible flight, I'm telling you.
I gotta tell you. Also, by the way, someone said, "Oh, a naked dude." Now he was actually wearing like pink-ish looking boxers. He was actually clothed to some extent. It's just that it didn't look like it from a distance, but you can tell that he was wearing like some sort of pinkish like boxers. Just to explain that, because I see a lot of people saying, "Was that guy naked?" No, he was wearing some like very pink, almost flesh-colored boxers. But you can see it in the full screen, like high definition view that I have. I don't know if YouTube's giving that to y'all though. But we also did get to see the Russians getting hit here near the Pokrovsk by the 25th. Which we also call the post office, because rain, snow, sleet, or shine, these people are absolutely blitzing Russians with drones. And we can see here them hitting a lot of. Also see them flying one through the nether, I guess. I don't know, but we can also see them hitting some Russian artillery, blowing up a Russian supply truck.
I like that they come up with a whole like interface for like dropping bomblets on the left. It's like a whole custom like software for it and everything now.
Man, the 2nd Cav Regiment would kill to get this stuff.
They probably will before it's over with.
Man, maybe. We see them just blitzing Russians. Look at them go. The Pokrovsk front has never been better. And also considering that the Russians have now been encircled in Kucherev Yar for 48 hours, it's an incredibly great time to be on the Pokrovsk front right now.
Oh, look, they got the wind vane. They had to take down the weather station and stuff, too.
And we can see them just slamming the Russian positions. Look at that. Impressive stuff. But that's the end of the clip, and moving on from that clip and further on down and into the area of Zaporizhia, we also were able to see the Ukrainians destroyed an impromptu fuel depot that was constructed in the area. Also, folks, I have to say that I know that there's been some leniency about political comments, but political comments are going to have to end, folks. Like I don't know why people are starting to think that this is a forum for their political opinions and trying to encourage us about them. Like, I think, folks, for being here, whether you're a longtime viewer or not, though, y'all have got to like understand and respect the rule that we don't get into politics here. That's not just a rule for us; that's a rule for everyone. And before someone says, "But you do an imitation of the president," that's just a joke. That's not supposed to be political. Like, and that's not supposed to be making fun of the president in any particular way, and we did that on the last president as well. It's what we do. So please, folks, respect the fact that the channel is non-political. If you want to do politics, there are like 9 million political channels out there that do politics all day long of your exact flavor, but this channel isn't it. So moving on from that and down into Melitopol, we also were able to hear that 10 Russian soldiers were actually killed in a air raid by the Ukrainians that apparently was conducted overnight. And there was the airstrike. Pretty successful one, honestly. And that's the end of the clip, but nice to see. Moving on from that and into the Kherson area, we also were able to see Russian forces getting hit in this area as well.
Someone said I thought this was a baking show. Yeah, cooking up that fresh news. I'll tell you what, this is not a bakery here, but this well, I won't make that joke. But anyway, I could make some good jokes, so I'll keep it PG.
Are you regulated? Why are you regulated? You ought to be able to say whatever you want.
Yeah, nobody can say what they want anymore. Hell no. You have freedom of speech on paper, but what's the old phrase I like to say? You're not free of the consequences.
You're free to
I
say
guess
what
you're
you
not.
want, but you're not free of the consequences. That's what a Karen says every day.
But in reality, though, what that is, it's basically the regulation of speech that's been transferred from the government's responsibility to the private sector's responsibility. So essentially, it's the same thing, but technically, it's not the government doing it. So it's technically free speech, but technically not, depending on how you want to convince yourself.
But look, folks, we all know you don't really have the freedom of speech in this country. It's all an illusion. I'm just kidding, by the way. You actually do have the freedom of speech. It's just not on private forums like this one. So, oh, buddy. That extends to a lot these days. But, we'll keep our comments on that to ourselves. But
Also, by the way, I mean, they're just doing a number on this place. I mean, goodness. I mean, they've got the freedom of war in this place. I'll tell you, it's a definitely got a thing going on here. Wow. I'm kind of doing like a Putin, honestly. That sounds like a King Yapper fest right there.
listen, are you some sort of a clown, or are you a real man? Now let's talk about the house construction. House construction started in 10,000 BC by the ancient people of the Wampanoag tribe inside of the eastern part of Russia, where Ugabuga the Wise created a fiefdom within this area. They did not have feudalism in most of the world at this time, but they did have feudalism in Russia, because we are an advanced society of people, and even in 10,000 BC, there was a feudalistic society. But Ugabuga the Wise knew to keep it away from all of the uncivilized peoples of the world, like those wicked wayward ways of the West. So we kept it to ourselves as the Roman Empire rose and fell, and also as long as the rise of the medieval kingdoms. But once we finally emerged, we made sure to depict ourselves in a very backwards-looking way technologically, to make everyone think that we were not an incredibly scary thing. And then we did that for hundreds and hundreds of years, where everyone always thought that Russia was a very backwards country, technologically and socially, up until now. And then we truly showed that we actually were technologically backwards the entire time, and it was not a joke. But moving on from that, it is time for us to move on into Odessa, where we were also able to see that the Russians did airstrike Odessa significantly overnight, and there were impacts inside the city. Unfortunately, we do not know exactly what was hit, but it does appear that there was a major airstrike. And so with that, folks, 2 hours and 5 minutes after the stream started, we finally made it to the end of the news. There is no speech from Zelensky today. He was on a plane to the United States when the speech was supposed to be made, so he didn't make one. But I have a feeling that tomorrow will be a time of high drama, and we will, of course, be live. Also have to say really quickly that one reason why I know that there's going to be high drama tomorrow is that the Secretary of State said that there wasn't going to be an ambush. That would make no sense. And that guarantees that there will be an ambush, because why would he address that specifically if that was not the plan? It's going to happen. So we will be live tomorrow to showcase that, because that will probably be something I'm sure many of y'all are interested in. So we will be going live tomorrow with that show to be able to make sure to cover it when it's happening and to also address anything that will be going on. But at this moment, the news is effectively over, and it's time for us to move on to the second segment of this stream, which is where we get to talk to all of y'all. And we have a decent amount of live chats to get to, and also a couple of top donors between the last segment and this one that we have not been able to call out yet. So Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so we've already called off all of our top donors for the night, and we are sitting at right now about $3,400 raised, which is almost about $1,000 above the $2,500 goal. So a huge shout to the LSA for making that happen once again, and we do appreciate that sincerely, and we know Ukraine appreciates it, because in these trying times, in the midst of all this yapping that politicians love to do about whether or not to support Ukraine or not, Ukraine is still fighting the war, and their civilians are still suffering at the hands of a madman, which is Vladimir Putin. So that's support is going to help those Ukrainian individuals that are there in Ukraine that are having to deal with the fallout of these decisions. So a huge shout out to everybody for that once again. Extremely generous, and we sincerely do appreciate that very, very much. So we are now going to jump right into all of your questions that you're throwing in tonight, all the live chat questions and the Morse code decoders of the stream. And also, by the way, Tom Exman said, what time about tomorrow? The coverage should be starting before 1 p.m. Eastern, which is are we an hour ahead or behind that?
We are an hour behind that, so that'll technically be starting at noon our time, but 1 p.m. Eastern for everyone else.
Okay, so we'll probably be on shortly before that. Probably, I would assume maybe 30 minutes before then or something like that, maybe, to cover that. Because, of course, we'll have to be on beforehand to be able to get everything set up and all of that. So it probably will be slightly before 1 p.m. Eastern or 12 p.m. Central Time. So that's generally the time we're looking for here. But I'm sure they'll be late because it's never on time. But that's not a political statement. That's just the way it works. It's just the planning. But anyways, jumping into our Morse code decoders of the stream, tonight we have Paul Schultz, Kevin J., Mason Miami, Joni Dog, Norm Pritchett, Erbo Garbo, Heroyal Fluffiness, Kush, and Kopiaterix. They said the Morse says Iran is getting crazy, threatening war, and Zelensky will be in Washington tomorrow, and LLT, LSA.
And ding, 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 ding. That is the sound of money, and y'all got that down on the nail. That was the Morse code message of the night. I got to congratulate y'all greatly in the Least Spring Single Corps for getting that Morse code message correct time and time again. Absolutely incredible thing, and of course, great to hear that y'all once again were able to get that right. And so with that, it's time for us to move on into the question segment. And I also saw someone say, and I'll say this really quickly, someone said, oh man, that's going to be really hard to not be political considering all of these different leaders are going to be there. No, it's actually quite easy, because for news analysis purposes, whether you like Starmer or Macron or Mertz or Trump does not matter, because they're the people there. So it's not a political thing when you actually look at it through a normal lens, because Starmer's going to be in the UK until he's ousted in a snap election, and Macron will be there until he's possibly ousted or re-elected in another election. Same with Mertz, same with Trump, so on and so forth. They're just the leaders who are involved. There's nothing political about them being present. Like, people may try and make it into that, but that's really trying really hard. As far as foreign policy is concerned, we know who these people are, what their positions are going to be, their general behaviors and mannerisms, and their general outlook and strategic view for their nations. So that's generally where it's analyzed from. And it doesn't really matter whether you like them or not, or you like their positions or not. It's just analyzing and assessing and addressing all that kind of stuff. So it's incredibly easy to cover it entirely in a non-political manner. Like, it's actually easier said than done. Well, actually easier done than said, to be entirely honest. But with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, it's time for us to get on into the questions at large. So Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so jumping into our live chat questions. Also, by the way, everybody's talking about the suit thing. I have no idea if Zelensky's going to wear a suit tomorrow. If he wants to try to smooth things over, which, I'm just saying to smooth things over just for the hell of it and just for the sake of cooperation, hopefully he wears a suit, or otherwise I'm sure that he'll probably be, yapping about that. So, well, hopefully he wears a suit, but we'll have to see. I might run a suit poll here in a minute just to get everybody's opinion on whether or not you think that's going to be the case or not, just out of curiosity. But jumping into our first live chat question, this one goes goes to AF Kaplan. He said, how can Iran prepare for war when their people and military don't even have running water?
Generally, beyond the civilian aspect or the general aspect of just lacking water, they technically can still fight, and they'll just prioritize water to the military, most likely, to keep them fighting, and to also make sure that they can put down any civil unrest if need be. So that probably will be the reason why they are able to go to war, even as they are running out of water. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, and with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next live chat question goes to Steve McKinnon. He has a question about Belarus and the military exercises. He said, is the Belarus military exercise, the POD 2025, a pretense to invasion like 2022 Ukraine was?
There is actually a belief that it may be. We do understand that the Zapad 2025 military exercise of this year is going to be one of the largest of the war games existence, with around 100,000 active service members involved, which is large enough to be able to support and sustain an offensive into the Suwalki Gap and hold that territory, while also possibly conducting secondary offensives either deeper into Poland or towards the Lithuanian capital, one or the other. So we generally do assume, and many do assume, including those of the European Union Parliament, that this may actually be a prelude to an attempted invasion. So there is the possibility of that. Saying that it's guaranteed going to be an invasion is a little bit of a stretch, but there certainly is the kind of room, or at least the ability by this war game, to evolve immediately into an armed invasion and kick it off in the midst of the military exercise that they say that they're going to be conducting. We also have to remember that this military exercise, at least as far as the pod is concerned, is designed and built with the theory, or the theoretical, that the war game is based off of an invasion of the Suwalki Gap. So it's not that far to say that it would be able to kick off immediately, because it's not like it's a war game trying to simulate Arctic operations. For example, someone invades Russia and Siberia. That isn't what the war game is structured off of. This war game is happening right next to the Suwalki Gap, designed entirely around the concept of offensively taking the Suwalki Gap and then conducting secondary offenses beyond that. So this war game, in its natural design through the years, already is built and tailor-made to that idea. So it would not be hard at all to just arm them with the live ammunition they're already going to be armed with and then start an offensive. So I would have to say there's a decent chance of it, just based off of what we know right now. War games are usually a somewhat scary thing, and are either meant to posture and put those nations in fear, or to actually be a disguise for starting an armed invasion. And it could be one or the other. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, so let's address the question, a very scary question. It's got me shivering my timbers at this point. So, will Zelensky wear a suit tomorrow? The age-old question, in the midst of Putin literally conducting almost basically a genocide on Ukraine. Let's address the question, will Zelensky wear a suit? 54% said no, while 46% said yes. And honestly, I'm kind of up in the air on this one. Zelensky might hold his ground and just wear his usual military attire, or he might wear a suit. I'm not really sure which one he's going to wear. To me, honestly, it's really not that relevant at this point. There's a lot more larger issues at play than the suit. Back when Zelensky showed up the first time, it was a little bit of a different circumstance. This time, it feels like we're getting on the verge of a global conflict breaking out. So it seems like the suit's probably not the most important thing at this point. Maybe back in the day, could have argued about it, but now it's probably not appropriate, at least in my opinion. So we'll just have to wait and see. Now, if he shows up wearing like a full-on Ukraine flag suit, that could be like his form of protest, I guess you could say. He'd technically be wearing a suit at that point, but he'd be wearing a suit that was very flashy with the Ukraine flag on it. Or maybe a suit that has pictures of all the people that Vladimir Putin has victimized throughout the war on a suit, or something like that. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would generally have to say he's most likely not, because we haven't seen him wear a suit to any other meeting that he's had with the President of the United States since then, like in Rome or anywhere else. So I generally think that he's not going to be wearing a suit. I mean, he didn't even technically wear a suit to the funeral of the prior Pope, Pope Francis. So I would doubt that he would wear a suit to the next meeting with the President, which is tomorrow. I have a feeling he'll be showing up in his normal attire. Maybe a formal shirt, but it won't be going much farther than that. But formal shirts are in the normal realm of attire for him. So I have a feeling that he's not going to be wearing one. But at the same time, I've also got to say it doesn't really matter all too much, because, you know, like here's my thing on that. there aren't even people who wear formal attire in the U.S. Congress anymore. So if we want foreign leaders to wear formal attire, we don't even enforce that rule in our Congress. And we've also had people who have been in the Oval Office, either affiliated with the president or not, who also haven't worn suits, and they've been treated quite well and hospitably. And so it wouldn't really make a lot of sense to have a double standard on Zelensky. And on top of that, out of everything that we could be concerned about at this point, I feel like suits are probably the last thing on the list in general. But with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion. But I do not think that he'll be wearing a suit. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, so getting back into y'all's questions in the live chat, we do have a question here from none other than Tom Xman, and he said, here's a good question, Matt. Who's going to be with Zelensky, the U.S. and Kyiv, in tomorrow's meeting, and who's all going to be there? So basically, it's all the EU leaders that we listed off earlier. It's obviously Zelensky as well. That's on that side, but for the White House's side, it's basically going to be the same cast of characters that we saw at the earlier meeting when Zelensky came the last time to the White House. The vice president will be there. Many people were asking about that. He is going to be present. So, of course, last time that didn't go so well, so we'll have to see how it goes this time. But it's going to be pretty much the same people. The Secretary of State, I believe the economic advisor will be there as well. Besant, he'll also be there. And also all the reporters that were there last time. So it's basically a repeat of the last one. So quite interesting. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to say it is going to pretty much be a repeat. We generally understand that on the president's side, let's see, the Secretary of Defense, the Secretary of State, the Vice President, the Secretary of the Treasury, all those sorts of people will be present. And then on the European side, it's going to be Merz, Starmer, Macron, Maloney, the EU Commissioner, the Prime Minister of Finland, as well as the NATO General Secretary Mark Rutte and Zelensky. So they're all going to be present on the Ukrainian side, and then we're going to have all the other aforementioned folks on the American side. So that's generally going to be the composition of this meeting that's coming up here soon. Do not really know how this is going to go, once again, because at least in terms of the power players that'll be present, I mean, all three of the biggest power players in Europe, the Germans, the French, and the British, are going to be present, along with the Finnish, the Italians, the NATO General Secretary, and the EU Commissioner. So as far as power players, excluding Zelensky and the other four, Macron, Starmer, and Merz are in pretty prominent positions to sway how this is going to go, or generally dictate to the United States what the European position is going to be. Because once again, to go through it, Germany is the economic power of Europe. France is a close, France and Britain are a close second in that regard. But Britain is generally considered, while it doesn't have the largest military in the continent, it is considered to be the second most important voice in NATO militarily. And then the French pretty much are the de facto leader of the pseudo-European sphere that exists at the moment, and are also a military and economic major player, at least within the region. So these three alone, generally based off of their reaction to whatever happens tomorrow, will be setting the stage for whatever will be happening beyond this point. Because if the president tries to force the Ukrainians into a peace deal that the Ukrainians don't accept, and they don't like the proposal either, they could pretty much just run the war single-handedly with those three nations alone and support the Ukrainians without the U.S. being involved. It may even start to move on into an independent European sphere from that point, separate from a collective Western one. So
I doubt that would happen, though. Because remember this: people are forgetting this one aspect right here. The U.S. has signed the mineral deal with Ukraine. A lot of people have forgotten about that. So that gives the U.S. an economic incentive to keep supporting Ukraine, even if Zelensky decides to basically tell the U.S. to take a hike and he's going to continue the war anyway and not come to a peace deal, or basically a capitulation deal is what I want to call it. That's really what it is. If Zelensky says he's not going to agree to it, then the U.S. would be losing out on the mineral deal. Because why would Ukraine uphold their end of the mineral deal if the U.S. isn't even going to provide any type of defensive support anymore? That wouldn't make any sense. It's like the U.S. would be basically backing out of the agreements to some degree or another, and Ukraine would be left holding the bag. So why would they stay in it at that point? So that might keep the U.S. involved, is that mineral deal.
Also, I saw someone say France is a weak country. No, they have 400 nuclear weapons, tactical and strategic. They are the largest nuclear power actually in Europe. Britain is second. They have just a couple of dozen less. But Europe and Britain, oh, well, actually France and Britain combined, actually have as many nuclear weapons as the People's Republic of China. And most of them are strategic, which are ICBM varieties. So those are some pretty significant nations to be dealing with. And also that's something that's funny as well. well, is that people act like, oh, you can beat around the British and the French. You really can't, because they could just nuke you. Like that's kind of like the truth of the end of it all, is that people don't really realize that, because the British and the French don't really flaunt that a lot, but they are quite significant nuclear powers. Britain alone has more nuclear weapons, I believe, than India and Pakistan combined, if I'm not mistaken. So not exactly a weak country when it comes to the nuclear deterrent, nor is France. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that well, because those two countries are actually quite strong on the geopolitical stage due to the fact that they're nuclear powers, and also due to the fact that both of those have veto powers on the UN Security Council as well, along with the United States. So with that, I hope that addresses that the best I can, and with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. Also, by the way, another thing as well, if Zelensky agrees, and he's already said he's not going to agree to it, but if he agrees to give up land, which he legally cannot do according to his own words, let's say he throws out the Ukrainian constitution and says, "Oh, screw the constitution. I don't care what the law says. If I want to give away a huge portion of Ukraine that Russia's already occupied, I'll just simply give it away." The problem with that is it's really messing the U.S. up pretty badly, because like we mentioned before, that's where the minerals are that Ukraine has. A vast majority of the minerals that Ukraine has in the ground is the places where Russia is currently occupying, and the spots where Russia wants to occupy and also take it through this peace deal. So I don't know why the U.S. would be pushing that so hard, knowing that we're literally giving away the minerals that we just got access to, unless we're believing that Russia would truly let us have those minerals, maybe at a cheaper rate or something. I'm not really sure if that would even be the case, but I don't understand that part, because it doesn't make any sense for the U.S. to go through such lengths to get the mineral deal back in the day, and then to basically squirm their way out of it now by forcing Zelensky to hand away the minerals to Russia.
Yeah, I would say I don't really know what's even going to be talked about tomorrow. I have no clue. But I generally will say, folks, that considering, I'll just be entirely honest with y'all, the president has gotten nowhere with the Russians, and the Russians have made the same insane demands that they've always made. So what the president's going to do, because he, of course, has been saying that he's going to just, bring the hammer down on the Russians, and he's not, because I think he's actually scared to, but I don't know why. But apparently he's scared to. So what he's going to do is he's going to most likely try and shift the blame onto the Ukrainians, because they're a non-nuclear power and they're not really that scary, and Britain and France generally have had a historically friendly position with the United States, considering that we're all a part of the same sphere. So you'll most likely just land blast all of those countries because he feels safe doing that, while at the same time he won't really take any action against the Russians. That, I'll be honest with y'all, I have a feeling that that'll be the expected course of action for tomorrow. I wouldn't doubt it, to be entirely honest with y'all, if he sits down at a table with all of them and just tries to blame every single one of them for the continuation of the war. Well, that's what I would think it has a decent possibility. Not a guaranteed possibility of happening, but there's a decent chance that it could happen. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next, a big shout out to LC39A, by the way. He just threw in a $133 donation to the fundraiser, and a huge shout out to you, good sir, for also supporting the fundraisers. And he also brought us up to almost $3,500 raised, which is exactly almost $1,000 above the goal. So thank you very much, LC39A, once again, for helping to keep the fundraiser going as well. And we're moving on to our next live chat question, which goes to Rumpelstiltskin. He said, didn't Sergei Lavrov wear a sweatshirt with the inscription CCP, which is the Cyrillic abbreviation for the USSR, upon arriving in Anchorage?
Yes, he did, actually. But apparently, it doesn't matter if you're wearing it only not in front of the president. So he kind of just got away with it. But I find that to be very weird symbology on Lavrov's end, to wear a USSR shirt. But anyways, with that, I hope that has addressed that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to VMBH, who said, what if Russia is stockpiling fuel in order to go hot in the war during these Zapad exercises?
I would doubt it, because stockpiling fuel, but also doing that in this way wouldn't really make a lot of sense, because we already know that they've been in a several 100,000 barrel of oil fuel deficit for months on end, if not years on end. So they really wouldn't even have the chance to stockpile, because most of the stockpiles have already mostly been consumed by the military in Ukraine or the domestic economy inside of Russia. So I would generally say that they probably haven't been stockpiling, because Ukrainian attacks would guarantee that there wouldn't really be a possibility of stockpiling. If anything, they're just leveling out their stockpiles right now, but not really building them up or building them back up to what they were. So with that, I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a question from Andrew Honeycutt. He said the nuclear cat is basically out of the bag. So is there any real way to contain it, or is it just a whack-a-mole situation?
Uh, I wouldn't say the nuclear cat is out of the bag, at least in terms of non-proliferation. The only countries in the world that have broken the non-proliferation treaties is North Korea and Israel. If we were to be entirely honest, they certainly did break it. But the North Koreans did it in absolute secrecy, and we didn't really know that they were doing it until it was way too late. And then with the Israelis, they never officially admitted they have a nuclear weapon, and we've never been able to prove that they've tested them. Although we believe that they tested them in the South Pacific, we don't have enough proof to connect that to them. So, with that in mind, I'd have to say that generally the nuclear cat isn't out of the bag, and generally you do have to play whack-a-mole though, because any country that's trying to pursue a nuclear weapon has to be stopped before they actually get it. So, with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least from what I would know. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here is going to go to none other than Fire Guy, who said, any updates on the North Korean troop and or equipment movements going to Russia?
We haven't been able to hear a lot about them right now. That generally is something that we get very seldom updates on, and we just have to work off the last bits of information. We heard that there was apparently going to be 6,000 additional North Korean troops that were going to be sent to Russia here in the near future, along with some supplies. But generally beyond that, we haven't been able to hear much of anything else. So with that, I hope that has addressed that well, and we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Ben Bacon Bits. And he said, do y'all have any conjecture on the effectiveness of the Chinese air defense systems that Iran purchased? And I haven't checked the range versus the HARM missiles.
They generally do have an extensive range. HARM missiles do have a shorter range than those of the radar systems. I believe the HARM has about a 70-mile range. Most air defense systems like the HQ-9 have about a 100-mile range or so. So that aircraft would actually have to fly through the air defense perimeter of that missile system to be able to fire off its missile. And generally you want to have the shortest amount of flight time, so that way there's very little time to be able to react to that missile. But generally that's what we would know off of the bat. As far as efficacy is concerned of the missile system, we wouldn't really know because they've never really been used in combat for us to visually say whether they work well or not. So that also plays in as well. We haven't seen it in combat use before, and we've very rarely ever seen it in drills either in China, and drills are a very contained sort of an environment where generally, at least for Chinese purposes, everything goes perfectly and the missile system works as it's supposed to, instead of what it may work as in an actual combat environment. So with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Knox Date. And Knox said, if the U.S. states or adds the security guarantee in Ukraine, if the war ends, how long would it be for the U.S. and Russia to actually enter a direct war after that agreement was reached?
I would have to say that, let's see, that's a good question. In
an Article 5 style security guarantee, if that's what Knox is referring to, I don't know. Like, honestly, I was talking about this earlier with the Enforcer off the air. It seems to me that that would probably hasten a direct conflict, because I don't believe for one second that Russia actually intends on honoring their word. They've never honored their word in the past when it comes to invading Ukraine, taking Crimea, etc. They've never honored their word on anything. So with Article 5 guarantee, all that would be doing is basically setting up a tripwire for Russia to basically fall over and trigger, which would immediately drag the U.S. into it. I would personally say, just crystal balling, and this is of course not going to be totally accurate because it's just my speculation, it's my guess. I would say personally less than a year. If history is a guide, about 12 months, I would say. But Enforcer, what do you think?
I would say anywhere in between 4 months to a year, war could start. The Russian Federation may try and start a war a little bit quicker, especially if they're able to build up their military abilities rapidly, either due to the war industry still going on. And of course, there is some sort of a level of decay that will exist economically in Russia if they continue to keep the war machine going, which they will. And that means they have to kick it off within about 4 months to a year from now. They only have about 2 years left economically, or a year and a half left economically, before they completely collapse given their current condition. So they'll have to start it off at some point within the next year to 4 months. So with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least from what I would know. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to AF Kaplan. He has a question again about the White House meeting tomorrow, because of course that's a hot topic. AF Kaplan said, since Zelensky will not be going into this White House meeting alone, do you think the second meeting at the White House will end better for Ukraine? Now, AF Kaplan, I also talked about this as well with Andrew off the air also earlier today. I see it going two ways. It can go one of two ways here. Either the U.S. president simply wants to get Zelensky in the White House so he can get on camera on the record that he made an attempt to end the war, and Zelensky is allegedly, or at least in the public's view, Zelensky's the one basically taking the reins and saying he doesn't want to end it. That might be what the president's trying to do here, the U.S. president, but it's also a possibility that the U.S. president could be walking him into another political ambush, and that maybe he's going to go off on him in the White House, kind of like he did the first time. So it could go either way. Not really sure. But Enforcer, what do you think?
I would have to say it's probably not going to go that much better for him, to be entirely honest, because from what we know now, Zelensky is going to be in the room with the president when the actual negotiation is being conducted alone. And then they'll meet with the European leaders later after Ukraine comes to their decision. That all sounds like a pressure tactic to remove Ukraine from any supporting voices that could be present in the room and to just start absolutely ambushing him. Just to be entirely frank with how that's set up, that sounds like it's going to be an ambush. I would be surprised if it isn't tomorrow, and if it's not, then I'm wrong. I'll just eat my foot on that, and that is what it is. It's no big deal. But it sounds like he's being set up for an ambush tomorrow, and the European leaders will not really be able to be present at the hour of need, I guess you could say, when that whole ambush happens, and then they'll only be allowed around after the whole ambush has occurred and is over. If they even come around at all at that point, the whole thing might just be canceled at that point. They might all be told to leave, which would be pretty rude, but that wouldn't be too out there from what we've seen prior. So I hope that addresses that well, at least in my opinion. I'll be entirely honest, though. I generally expect that tomorrow is going to be another, like, the best way I can say it, and I'm not trying to say this in a political way, but it's going to be another embarrassment for America, at least as far as decorum in foreign policy is concerned, because the first go around, in my opinion, wasn't really a shining moment in American civility or reason in foreign policy. But anyways, with that,
I think they might lighten the tone a little bit this time. I don't think they're going to go as hard on Zelensky as they did last time, because we have to remember that in the United States, the poll numbers just came out. About 88% of Americans have an unfavorable view of Vladimir Putin. So that doesn't necessarily mean they like Zelensky, but that does mean, though, that most Americans, the overwhelming majority of Americans, understand that Putin is not our friend. And despite all the bots you see on the internet praising Vladimir Putin and claiming that America loves him, 88%, according to the poll numbers, do not like Vladimir Putin, and they know he's evil. So I would say, generally speaking, for political appearance, they're probably going to go lighter on Zelensky. It's probably not going to be beautiful, as they would say, but it's probably not going to be as ugly as it was last time, at least in my personal speculation.
yeah, we'll have to generally see, but I'm honestly thinking, folks, I'll just be frank, I don't really have high hopes for what's going to be happening tomorrow, but we'll just have to wait and see what it turns into. But with that, we are on to the third to last question of the night.
And this one goes to Old Warrior, who said several pundits I read claim that the drone that sank the freighter may have been launched from Azerbaijan that sunk that freighter in the Russian port carrying the Iranian parts. And have you heard anything verifiable?
I haven't heard anything verifiable on that. We saw that the drone was launched from Ukraine, and it wouldn't be out of the question, considering that Ukrainian drones launched from Ukraine have been able to reach as far as this region of the Russian Federation, the Utka region, or even as far east as Ufa. It wouldn't really make a lot of sense that they would launch it from Azerbaijan and possibly implicate the Azerbaijanis into a diplomatic scandal. So I would say that it was launched from Ukraine, from what we could tell. So with that, I hope that does address that well, and we are on to the second to last question of the night.
And this one goes to Joe Garrow. He said, does Russia buy Iranian refined petroleum products, or do they have enough of their own?
Russia generally does not buy a large amount of petroleum from anyone. They produce such a large amount of it, at least based off of their domestic consumption, that importation of of any foreign petroleum is not really heard of. They are a major exporter of petroleum products, and it's how they make a lot of their own money. So generally, they don't import a great deal. But let me go pull it up really quickly. Does Russia import crude oil? Let's see here. It's an incredibly small amount. In 2023, Russia imported $12.4 million worth of crude petroleum, and that was it for the whole year. So it's a non-existent figure, because we have to remember that India consumes something to the tune of around $15 billion a year of Russian petroleum, or at least that's not even really the figure. That was the figure if they changed their oil consumption from Russian oil to Middle Eastern and American oil. They were going to be losing about $15 billion a year net economically in the additional costs. So the number is even farther than that. They buy, I believe, something like $60 billion worth of Russian oil every year. So the fact that Russia only imported about $12.9 million of crude oil from around the world, it means that they quite literally do not import crude oil in any measurable number. So with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we are on to the final question of the night. So who is the lucky last person to throw in the lucky last question of the night?
And that viewer is Destiny Edgington, who said, speaking of Iran, is the Ayatollah of Iran still even alive at this point?
Yes, he is alive, and I believe he was on TV not that long ago, just a few days ago. But he is alive, and if he died, it would be a huge thing in Iran. They would act like God himself had died, a lot like they do with the Kim family when they die in North Korea. So he's still alive out there, but depending on how things go here in the future with the Israelis might shorten his lifespan a good bit, because they were saying that they were wanting to do that last time and only held off due to U.S. protest. But with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least from what I know right now. But at the very moment, in the present right now, not speaking of the possibilities of the future, Khamenei is still alive. But with that, I thank you all so much once again for watching, and that is the end of tonight's stream. I've got to thank you incredibly all for watching. In 2.5 hours, we've had 13.1 thousand people here at the peak of the stream, and 100,000 people have watched this stream since the start. We got to thank you all so much once again for being here tonight, and we have to thank everyone who supported the fundraiser, because y'all got the fundraiser up to a whopping $3.5 thousand raised. Truly amazing and incredible stuff. And we've got to thank you all massively, because y'all folks have continued to support American and Western interests around the globe through these streams, fundraisers every single Sunday, and it's great to see that we were able to do that once again this Sunday night. So a massive thanks to you all so much once again for watching, and we will actually be seeing you all tomorrow around 1 p.m. Eastern time to cover the summit between the President of the United States and practically the entirety of European leadership, including Ukraine. And so with that, we will see you all then. Good night, good luck, take care, stay safe, Slava Ukraini, long live the Lee Spring Army, and long live the Republic.
And with that, folks, thank you all for another successful Sunday night fundraiser tonight, where we raised almost $3,500, which is $1,000 above the goal, and a huge shout out for you all to make that possible yet again tonight on a Sunday. And also, be sure to join us tomorrow around 1 p.m. Eastern to cover that highly anticipated meeting between Zelensky and the U.S. president, because honestly, I am a bit excited and a bit nervous for it, to be honest with everybody, and I'm very fascinated to see how this is going to go, and I'm hoping that it goes well, or at least the best it can go. So we'll have to see, but be sure to join us for that. And also a huge shout out to the 100,000 plus people that were here tonight. And we will see all of you tomorrow. And with that, Slava Ukraine, Herom Slava, get some rest, and good night.
Spring on the shore.